Get down. The word tore out of Ethan's throat before his brain had time to argue with his body. He was already moving, already airborne across the counter, already crossing the diner floor in 3 strides, already throwing every pound of his 19-year-old frame between the girl in the corner booth and the black barrel leveling itself through the rain-streaked window. The glass exploded. The world went white. And the last thing Ethan Walker heard before the floor came up to meet him was Lily Carter screaming his name, a name she had never once spoken out loud before that moment. If you've ever wondered what it looks like when an ordinary person does something extraordinary, stay with this story until the very end. And drop a comment below telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Ethan Walker did not look like someone the world would ever write a story about. He was 19 years old, 5'11", with sandy blonde hair that never quite sat right, no matter how many times he pushed it back, and hands that were always slightly rough from work he wasn't supposed to be doing at his age. He had the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting him, not because there was anything wrong with it, but because he never demanded attention. He never stood at the center of a room. He never raised his voice to be heard over other people. He was the kind of person who existed quietly at the edges of things, doing the jobs nobody else wanted, collecting the hours nobody else claimed, and going home afterward without expecting a single word of thanks. He worked the late shift at Raven Creek Diner, a small roadside place sitting on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, that smelled permanently of burnt coffee and motor oil from the repair shop next door. The owner, a heavy-set man named Gerald, who wore the same flannel shirt every single day, had hired Ethan 8 months earlier because he was the only applicant who showed up on time and didn't ask questions about the cash pay arrangement. Gerald wasn't a bad man. He just ran a tight operation with thin margins and no room for drama, and Ethan fit perfectly into that kind of place because Ethan himself had no room for drama either. Drama costs money. Drama costs time. And Ethan Walker had very little of either. His mother, Sandra, had been sick for 2 years. Not dramatically sick, not the kind of sick that made people bring casseroles to your door and post things on social media asking for prayers. The quiet kind. The kind where you wake up one morning and your body has simply started making decisions without consulting you, and the medical system hands you a stack of papers and a payment plan and tells you to figure the rest out yourself. Sandra Walker worked at a laundromat 3 days a week on the days she felt strong enough to stand, and Ethan worked every other hour of every other day to cover what she couldn't. He wasn't angry about it. That was the thing people would later struggle to understand about Ethan Walker. He wasn't angry. He didn't walk around Phoenix carrying resentment like a stone in his chest, looking for somewhere to put it down. He just worked. He cleaned tables. He restocked the condiment stations. He repaired the wobbly leg on booth number 4 with a piece of wood and 2 screws he'd bought himself because Gerald kept putting it off. And because Ethan couldn't walk past something broken without his hands wanting to fix it. It was a personality trait. It would turn out to be a destiny. He first noticed her on a Wednesday night in October, 3 weeks into his shift rotation. She came in just before 9 when the dinner crowd had thinned down to 2 truckers at the counter and an older couple splitting a piece of paint near the window. She was young, not much younger than Ethan, maybe 18, maybe just barely, with pale blonde hair pulled back in a way that looked more functional than fashionable, like someone who needed her hair out of her face rather than someone who'd spent time arranging it. She wore a dark jacket, 2 sizes too large for her frame jeans, and shoes that looked like they'd seen serious miles. She chose the corner booth, not the booth by the window, not the booth near the door. The corner booth, the one tucked furthest from the entrance, where she could see the entire room without anyone being able to come up behind her. She sat down and immediately shifted her position so that her back was to the wall, and both exits were visible from where she sat. Ethan noticed because he noticed everything. It was an occupational thing. When you spent enough time watching a space, you learned its rhythms, and you noticed when someone entered that rhythm, like a wrong note in a familiar song. She ordered black coffee and a slice of toast. She didn't look at the menu. She didn't look at her phone. She looked at the door. Ethan brought her their coffee without making a production of it. He set it down and said, "Toast will be up in a minute," and left her alone because she had that quality some people carry, a kind of invisible perimeter, a sense that the kindest thing you could do was give them their space and not ask questions they didn't want to answer. She left a tip that was bigger than the bill. She came back the following Wednesday. then the Wednesday after that. By December, she was a regular. Not in the loud, cheerful way that some regulars were not the kind who knew everyone's name and slapped the counter and asked what was good tonight. She was a regular in the way that a careful animal becomes a regular at a particular watering hole. She came at the same time. She sat in the same booth. She ordered the same thing, and every single time she watched the door. Ethan learned her name by accident. Gerald called it out once when her order was up. "Lily, your toast is getting cold." And she came to the counter and said thank you in a voice so quiet Ethan had to reconstruct the words after the fact. Lily. He didn't push for a last name. He didn't push for anything. He brought her coffee refills before she had to ask. He made sure booth number 7 was clean and available on Wednesday nights. And once in early December, when a group of drunk men came in loud and looking for something to make noise about, Ethan positioned himself at the end of the counter, closest to her booth, without drawing any attention to what he was doing. She noticed. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. The night she finally spoke to him beyond ordering in it was because the diner's heating unit gave out at 11 o'clock and the temperature inside dropped fast. Ethan came by with a blanket from the back. Gerald kept a few for long-haul truckers who needed them and set it on the edge of her table without saying a word. Lily looked at it, then she looked at him. "Why do you do that?" she asked. Ethan paused. "Do what? Look out for me. You don't even know me." He thought about it for a second. Not performing thinking, actually thinking. "You come here every week," he said. "That makes you part of the place. And I look out for the place." It wasn't a romantic line. It wasn't a clever line. It was just the truth delivered without decoration. Lily looked at him for a moment longer than felt entirely comfortable. Then she pulled the blanket around her shoulders and went back to watching the door. What Ethan did not know, what he had no possible way of knowing, was that the girl sitting in booth number 7 of Raven Creek Diner was not simply a quiet young woman with a habit of watching exits. She was Lily Carter. And Lily Carter was the only daughter of Victor Carter, who was the chapter president of one of the most respected and most feared motorcycle clubs operating in the American Southwest, the Hells Angels. Victor Carter had spent 30 years building something that couldn't be built with money alone. Reputation, yes. Loyalty, yes. But more than that, a kind of authority that came from being the same man at 52 that you had been at 22. Consistent, uncompromising, present. Victor had watched other club leaders get soft, get greedy, get careless, and watched those same men lose everything because of it. He had not gone soft. He had not gotten greedy. And he had, until 8 months ago, believed that being careful was enough. 8 months ago, a criminal organization operating under the name Iron Reapers had decided that the most effective way to destabilize Victor Carter's wealth influence across Arizona was not to attack him directly. That was a mistake that had gotten other men buried, but to attack the thing he could not protect with a display of force, his daughter. Lily had been moved 4 times in 6 months. Different cities, different names, different arrangements. Victor had resources and he had used all of them to keep her safe without making her feel like a prisoner. She had been given money, a phone with a private line directly to him, and a simple instruction: stay visible in low-profile places where showing up in force would create too much attention, but never stay in one place long enough to be tracked. The diner had been in theory perfect. Small, cash only, no cameras, a 2-lane road with open visibility in both directions for a quarter mile. Lily could sit in that corner booth and see anything coming from 3 different angles. What none of them had accounted for was the inside. The Wednesday night in late January started like every other one. Lily came in at 8:53. She sat in booth number 7. She ordered black coffee and toast. Ethan brought it. The diner was quieter than usual, 2 booths occupied besides hers. Gerald in the back running inventory, the night cook Hector working through a crossword puzzle between orders. Outside, a winter rain had moved in off the desert, the kind that came sideways and made the parking lot lights blur into orange smears against the dark. Ethan was wiping down the counter when he felt it, not heard it, felt it. A change in air pressure, a stillness that shouldn't have been still. He looked up. The black SUV was parked at the far end of the lot, engine running, lights off. It had been there for 4 minutes. He knew this because Ethan Walker noticed everything. He watched it for another 30 seconds, telling himself he was being paranoid, telling himself that people parked with their engines running in the rain all the time, telling himself the window came down 2 inches. And through those 2 inches, even through the rain and the distance and the bad light, Ethan saw the unmistakable shape of a barrel being steadied against the doorframe, aiming at booth number 7. His brain understood what was happening before his emotions had time to register it, and by the time his emotions caught up, his legs had already made the decision. He didn't shout a warning first. He didn't look for cover first. He moved. Get down. The words tore out of him as he vaulted the counter. Not climb vaulted, cleared the whole thing in one motion and crossed the 12 feet of open diner floor at a dead sprint that felt both impossibly fast and impossibly slow. At the same time, the way time operates in the moments when everything real happens. Lily was already turning at the sound of his voice, her body reacting to the shout before her mind could process the words, and Ethan hit her with his full body weight, driving them both sideways out of the booth just as the window behind where she'd been sitting exploded inward. The sound was enormous. Glass. Screaming. Mahesh screaming. The flat crack of the shot. Hector knocking over something metal in the kitchen. Gerald's voice calling out from the back in a panicked bark. The 2 other tables erupting into chaos. And underneath all of it, the floor coming up hard against Ethan's shoulder. His ribs, his cheekbone, with Lily beneath him, and his arms pulled tight around her, and every muscle in his body braced for the next shot, which didn't come. The SUV's engine revved, tires on wet asphalt, and then nothing but rain. The next 40 seconds were the longest of Ethan Walker's life. He didn't move. His body refused. Some deep animal part of his brain held him flat on the floor with his arms around Lily, listening for another shot, counting in a rhythm that had no logic to it, just counting, because counting was a thing to do when you couldn't do anything else. Lily was shaking, not crying, not screaming, shaking, the hard, involuntary shaking of a body processing something it wasn't designed to process. It's okay, Ethan said, and he set it into the side of her hair, close, quiet, the way you'd talk to someone standing on a ledge. It's okay. I've got you. Are you hurt? Tell me if you're hurt. I don't. She couldn't finish the sentence. Are you hurt? Ethan took a fast internal inventory. His shoulder was screaming. His cheekbone felt wrong. His ribs on the left side were sending signals that he was choosing to delay opening. I'm fine, he said, which was partially true in the way that things are partially true when adrenaline is doing most of your decision-making. He became aware of the glass around them, in a wide, sparkling field, in his hair, against his forearm. One small piece had found the back of his left hand and was sitting there like an accusation. He became aware of Gerald standing over them, white-faced cell phone in hand. I called 911. Don't move. I called 911. Just don't. We're okay, Ethan said. You're bleeding. I know. Ethan, I know. He pushed himself up carefully, first to his knees, then to his feet, one hand still on Lily's shoulder because her shaking hadn't stopped. Get everyone away from the windows, right now. Move them to the kitchen. Gerald stared at him. Gerald, the windows. Move them. Gerald moved. Lily sat up on the floor beside him, her back against the booth, and pressed both hands flat against her thighs the way people do when they're trying to anchor themselves to the ground. Her breathing was deliberate, controlled, like she'd learned how to breathe under pressure, like she'd needed that skill before. She looked at Ethan. She looked at the window. She looked at the pattern of glass on the floor between them, the trajectory of it, what it told her about where she'd been sitting. Then she looked at Ethan again. She started. Don't. He shook his head. Later. Right now, we need to get you somewhere that isn't in front of a window. She let him help her up, and that was when her phone rang. The sound of it made them both flinch. Lily reached into her jacket pocket with fingers that weren't entirely steady and looked at the screen. Something moved through her face, relief and dread in the same expression which shouldn't have been possible but was. She answered, Dad. Just that, just the word, no other words. A pause. Then a voice, low, steady, carrying the kind of weight that comes not from loudness, but from gravity, from the accumulated substance of a man who has spent decades being the person in the room that other people listen to. Lily, where are you? She looked at Ethan, then at the window, then at the floor. They found me, she said. 3 words. 3 quiet words. And yet the entire temperature of the space around Ethan seemed to change the way the air changes before weather arrives. The voice on the other end didn't panic. That was the thing Ethan noticed from 3 feet away, able to catch fragments through the phone speaker. The voice didn't spike, didn't break, didn't do any of the things a normal father's voice would do. Hearing those 3 words in that context, it simply got very, very controlled, very precise. Are you hurt? No. Who's with you? She looked at Ethan again, and there was something in the look, something complicated and grateful and weighted with a history he didn't yet know. Someone who helped me, she said. Put him on. Her expression tightened slightly. Dad, Lily, put him on. She held the phone out to Ethan. He took it. He didn't know why he took it. He took it because someone asked him to, and because his brain was running about 3 steps behind his body tonight. Hello. The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment, measuring. You the one who got my daughter down. Ethan looked at the broken window, at the glass, at the booth where Lily had been sitting 4 minutes earlier. Yes, sir. Another pause. What's your name? Ethan Walker. Ethan Walker. The voice said it like it was writing it somewhere permanent. Are you hurt? Some, nothing serious. You're bleeding. How do you? Your voice. A beat. I've been around enough hurt people to know what it sounds like. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. I'm going to have people there in 12 minutes, the voice said. You stay with my daughter until they arrive. You do not let her out of your sight. Do you understand? Yes. Ethan. Sir. The voice was quiet for one more second. Thank you. Then the line went dead. The 12 minutes felt like an hour. Ethan and Lily sat on the kitchen floor behind the prep counter. He'd moved everyone there away from the windows, away from the angles, and in those 12 minutes, Ethan learned more about what he'd walked into than he'd learned in 3 months of watching her sit in that corner booth. Not because she told him everything. She didn't. She told him what she needed to tell him, which was the minimum required to explain why 12 minutes was the relevant timeline and why the men who were coming would be the kind of men they were. Her father ran a motorcycle club. The people who'd shot through the window were enemies of that club, a criminal organization called the Iron Reapers, who had been targeting her for months as leverage. She had been in hiding, and someone somewhere had told them where she was. Ethan absorbed this information with the calm of someone whose brain was still running primarily on adrenaline and hadn't yet arrived at the part where it asked him how he felt about it. I should have told you, Lily said. Told me what? That sitting near me wasn't safe. She was looking at her hands. I let myself get comfortable. I let it feel normal. I should have moved on weeks ago. You didn't know. I always know. Her voice was flat. Not unkind, just flat. The flatness of someone who has accepted a particular truth about their life. I always know, and I always wait too long anyway because... She stopped. Because sometimes normal feels worth the risk. Ethan thought about Wednesday nights, about black coffee and toast, about the way she watched the door. You came here to feel normal, he said. She didn't answer. He didn't push. They arrived in 9 minutes, not 12. 4 motorcycles and 2 vehicles moving with the kind of coordinated quiet that Ethan would not have expected from machines that large. They filled the parking lot without chaos, without noise, without the performance of arrival that he might have anticipated. Men in cuts, the leather vests with the club colors, moved through the diner efficiently and without drama, checking sight lines, pulling glass from the floor, establishing the kind of situational awareness that comes from having done this kind of thing before. The man who came through the door last was Victor Carter. Ethan knew him immediately. Not from pictures, not from reputation, but from Lily's face, which shifted the moment her father entered the room, shifted in the specific way that a person's face shifts when the thing they have been holding themselves together waiting for finally arrives. Victor Carter was 52 years old and looked like someone had taken the idea of strength and worked it down to its essential form. Not big in the theatrical way. Thick through the chest and shoulders, a blonde beard going gray at the edges, hands with scars on them that had nothing to do with accidents, a face that had been handsome once and was now something more interesting than handsome, weathered into something that communicated competence without needing to say it. He crossed the room directly to Lily. He put his hands on either side of her face. He looked at her for a long time without speaking. Then he said very quietly, you're okay. Not a question. Lily said, I'm okay. And something in Victor Carter's chest visibly released. He held her for a moment, not long, not theatrical, and then he straightened and turned, and his eyes found Ethan. Ethan Walker had experienced being looked at in his life. He had been looked at by teachers who expected him to fail, by employers who weren't sure he was enough, by doctors in waiting rooms when he was there with his mother who looked at him with a kind of professional sympathy that had teeth in it. None of those looks felt like this. Victor Carter looked at Ethan the way you look at something you need to understand completely before you make a decision about it, thorough, careful, without any performance of the process. He took in the glass in Ethan's hair, the blood on his hand, the way Ethan was holding his left side without realizing he was holding it. Then he said, you're hurt. I'm fine. You said that on the phone. Still true. The corner of Victor's mouth moved. Not quite a smile, an acknowledgement. You jumped in front of my daughter. She was in the line of fire. You didn't know who she was. Ethan thought about it. Didn't matter who she was. That landed differently than Ethan intended should. He could see it land. Victor went still for a second, not dramatically. Still just the particular stillness of a person recalibrating around a piece of information that changed the shape of something. Sit down, Victor said. We need to get that hand looked at. I need to make sure Gerald and Hector are my people are handling your people. He gestured at the bench behind Ethan. Sit down, son. Son. It was such a small word. Ethan sat down. The injury to Ethan's hand turned out to be minor, a cut from the glass cleaned and wrapped by a man named Dutch, who moved through the medical kit with practiced efficiency and asked no questions about anything. The ribs were bruised, not broken. The shoulder was a deep muscle contusion. The cheekbone was intact. Gerald, white-faced and shaking, sat with two of Victor's men who were explaining something to him in low tones that seemed to be calming him down. Hector was in the parking lot with another one smoking in silence, with the resigned acceptance of a man who had seen strange things before and knew this would become a story he told without ever fully explaining. Lily sat beside her father. She was not quite touching him, but close the way two people sit when contact is available if needed, but both are working hard to appear like they don't need it. Ethan watched this and felt something he couldn't immediately name. It wasn't envy, it wasn't longing exactly. It was more the recognition of something he didn't have the specific quality of being someone's priority, of being the person another person crossed a room for. He pushed it down, pushed it to the back of shelves where he kept other things that didn't serve any current function. You work here, Victor asked him. Late shift, yeah. How long? 8 months. You do anything else? Taking classes, Ethan paused. Trying to. It's been patchy. Why patchy at hours? And my mom's sick, so. Victor was quiet for a moment. Your father, not in the picture. Another quiet. You've been watching out for Lily, Victor said, not accusing, just observing. She came in every week. I noticed she was careful. I stayed close in case it was warranted. He looked at the broken window. Turned out it was. You noticed she was careful. Victor said it slowly. Most people would notice she was pretty. Ethan looked at Lily, who was looking at the floor. Sure, he said, but that's not what I was paying attention to. The silence that followed that sentence had a particular quality to it. Dense, significant, the kind that forms around a moment that's going to be referenced later. Victor looked at his daughter. Lily was still looking at the floor, but the corner of her mouth had done something. The police arrived 17 minutes after someone called them, which in the geography of that particular precinct was slightly faster than average. The responding officers were brisk and professional and seemed to do a subtle recalibration of their approach when they processed the number of leather-jacketed men present in the parking lot, not hostile, not confrontational. Just the particular adjustment of people who understand that a room sometimes has more authority in it than their badge represents. Statements were taken. Ethan's statement was simple and true. He described what he saw, what he did in the order he saw, and did it. The officers wrote it down. They asked him twice about the SUV, and both times he gave them the same answer because it was the only answer he had. At no point did anyone in Victor Carter's immediate vicinity say anything that wasn't true. They also didn't say everything that was true. That distinction, Ethan would come to learn, was one of the many invisible lines in Victor Carter's world, not deception but selective disclosure, not lies but carefully chosen silence. It was a different relationship with information than the one Ethan had grown up with, where information was either shared or not, and the withholding of it was considered suspect. Victor's world operated on the understanding that not every truth was owed to every person, and that the management of information was itself a form of protection. He thought about that while he gave his statement. He thought about it while he sat at the counter afterward with a paper cup of bad diner coffee that Gerald had insisted on making despite everything. He thought about it while he watched Victor Carter move through his people, quiet, precise, unhurried, and he thought, this man has been managing information for 30 years. He wondered what that cost. It was nearly 2 in the morning when the parking lot finally cleared down to Victor's vehicles, his people, and one 19-year-old boy who had nowhere specific to be. Victor came and sat on the stool beside Ethan at the counter. He didn't say anything for a moment. Ethan didn't say anything either. This was comfortable for both of them in a way that most silences aren't. Someone told them where she was, Victor said finally. I figured. Someone who knew where we were keeping her. Ethan looked at his coffee. That's a short list. Yeah, a pause. A very short list. I'm not on it. Victor almost smiled. No, you're not. He turned the coffee cup on the counter. I have a problem, Ethan. The people who've been trying to hurt Lily, they're not going away because tonight didn't work. Tonight told them she has coverage here. They'll adjust. So you move her. We move her. He lets the words sit. And I have about 48 hours to find out which of my own people handed her location to the Reapers before I move her somewhere they can't find. Ethan did the arithmetic on that. And in the meantime, he said, Victor looked at him directly. In the meantime, the boy who took a bullet's worth of glass, putting himself between my daughter and a weapon, is sitting at a diner counter at 2 in the morning with a bandaged hand and 3 bruised ribs. Ethan said nothing. You have somewhere safe to sleep. I have an apartment. Is it secure? The question landed unexpectedly. Ethan thought about his apartment, ground floor, the lock on the front door that had been sticky since September, the window in the bathroom that didn't fully close. Define secure. Doesn't matter, Victor said. You're not going there tonight. I'm not. Ethan. Victor's voice didn't rise, didn't harden. It just became more present in the room. You put yourself between my daughter and danger. You are now, whether you intended it or not, connected to me, which means the people who want to hurt me will know your face by morning if they don't already. Ethan felt the weight of that settle into his bruised ribs. Oh, he said. Yeah. Victor stood up. Oh, there was a moment between Victor saying that and Ethan getting to his feet and following him out of that diner when Ethan Walker's entire life was balanced on a pivot point so thin he couldn't even see it clearly. One version of the story had him saying no, calling an Uber, going home, texting his mother that he was fine, sleeping in his ground floor apartment with its sticky lock and its insufficient window, waiting to see what morning brought. Another version had him following Victor Carter to wherever Victor Carter was going with no clear idea of what came next. He chose the second one, not because he was reckless, not because he was impulsive, but because the first option felt dishonest, and Ethan Walker had a near physical inability to choose a dishonest path, even when it was safer. He had jumped in front of a window for a girl he barely knew. He was not going to walk away from what that meant. Outside, the rain had settled into a fine mist, and the parking lot lights were doing that blurring thing they did, and somewhere out there on the 2-lane road, headlights moved in both directions, carrying strangers to ordinary nights. Lily was standing by one of the vehicles. She watched Ethan walk toward her. You don't have to come, she said. I know. You don't owe us anything. I know that too. She studied him. Why then? He thought about everything she had said on the kitchen floor, about choosing normal, about knowing she should leave and staying anyway because sometimes normal feels worth the risk. Because sometimes the right move isn't the safe move, he said. A pause. You sound like my father. Is that a bad thing? She thought about it, actually thought about it, which he appreciated. No, she said finally. That's actually not a bad thing at all. She got in the vehicle. Ethan got in after her. And the night swallowed the parking lot of Raven Creek Diner and Ethan Walker drove away from every ordinary thing he had ever known. He didn't sleep, not because of the pain, though the pain was present and specific and reminded him every 20 minutes that his body had opinions about what had happened. Not because of the adrenaline, though, that was still running its slow chemical recession through his system. He didn't sleep because his mind was doing what his mind did in quiet moments, taking inventory. He took inventory of everything he knew. A man named Victor Carter led a motorcycle club called the Hells Angels. A criminal organization called the Iron Reapers had been targeting Lily for months as leverage against her father. Someone inside Victor's inner circle had given away her location. Ethan was now, as of approximately 2 hours ago, inside that same circle, and somewhere out there in a black SUV that had already put miles between itself and Phoenix were people who now knew his face. He thought about his mother. He pulled out his phone and texted her. "I'm okay, long shift. Going to crash at a friend's place. Talk tomorrow." She'd be asleep. She wouldn't see it until morning. He hoped she wouldn't worry. He put the phone away and looked out the window at the Arizona desert moving past them in the dark. The flat geography of it, the way the night sky out here was a different depth than it was in the city. Lily was asleep against the door, or doing a convincing impression of sleep. One or the other. In the front seat, the driver, a man named Cole, compact and quiet with a jaw, like a ledge, drove without radio, without conversation, without apparent discomfort, with the silence. Victor rode in a separate vehicle. They were heading to a compound 40 minutes outside Phoenix that Ethan had been given approximately 3 pieces of information about, which was enough to tell him it existed and not enough to tell him anything else. He was okay with that. He had made a choice. He was going to live in the consequences of it. The compound was not what he expected. He didn't know exactly what he expected. Movies had given him a template that turned out to be completely wrong. He had expected something aggressive, something loud, something self-consciously intimidating. What he found was a working property. A large property secured with a perimeter that had clearly been thought about by people who thought about perimeters for a living. Inside that perimeter, buildings, vehicles, equipment. Men moving with the purposeful economy of people who had jobs to do and were doing them. A workshop, a garage, living quarters, a main house that was larger than it looked from the road. And over all of it, a particular quality of culture, the kind of culture that forms around shared values and maintained over time. These people trusted each other. They communicated in shorthand. They had hierarchy, but it wasn't performed. It was simply present, the way gravity is present, felt rather than announced. Ethan had grown up around exactly none of this. He found it unexpectedly compelling. He was shown to a room in the main house, clean, spare, functional, and told him he could sleep. He lay down on the bed with his boots still on, because taking them off felt like a decision he hadn't made yet, and he stared at the ceiling and he thought about the last 6 hours. At some point, without intending to, he fell asleep. In the morning, Victor Carter told him about the medical bills. Not across a table, not in any formal arrangement. He found Ethan in the kitchen at 6 in the morning trying to figure out the coffee maker, and he came in and did it himself, a complicated machine that Victor apparently had opinions about, and handed Ethan a cup and sat down and said it without preamble. His mother's medical bills, paid. Ethan set down the coffee cup. "What?" he said. "Her outstanding balance, the payment plan she's behind on, the medication she's been spacing out because she can't afford the full prescription." Victor met his eyes. Handled. Ethan's throat did something complicated. "You can't. I didn't ask your permission." He stopped. "That's a lot of money." "It's a debt," Victor said simply. "You don't argue with debts, you pay them." "I didn't do what I did because I expected." "I know. I didn't even know who she was." "I know that too." Victor's voice was not unkind, it was precise. "That's the whole point, Ethan. You didn't know who she was. You saw a person in danger and you moved. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Ethan didn't answer. "I've spent 30 years around people who calculate their moves based on what they stand to gain." Victor's hands wrapped around his cup. "You didn't calculate. You just moved. It was instinct." "Yeah," a pause. "That's the part you can't fake." Ethan looked at his hands. The bandaged one, the ordinary one. "Why are you telling me about the bills in person?" he asked. You could have just done it. Victor considered this. Because you have pride. I can see it from a mile away. The kind of person you are, you'd have found out and it would have landed wrong and you'd have spent feeling like something was taken from you without your consent. He met Ethan's eyes. So I'm telling you directly, it's not charity, it's a debt. You saved my daughter's life. I'm paying what's owed. Ethan sat with that for a long moment. You could have paid it without involving me, and he gestured at the room, the compound, everything beyond it. Yes, Victor said, I could have. He said nothing else. He didn't need to. Because the thing he was communicating, the thing beneath the thing was not just about the medical bills. It was about something Victor Carter had seen in a 19-year-old boy at 2 in the morning in a diner parking lot, something he was choosing to invest in, and both of them were aware of that transaction, even though neither of them named it yet. Ethan picked up his coffee. He drank it. Tell me about the Iron Reapers, he said. And Victor Carter for the first time looked at him with something that was not just assessment, something closer to the beginning of trust. Pull up a chair, he said. Victor talked for 2 hours. Not continuously. Not in the way of someone who enjoyed hearing themselves speak. He talked the way a man talks when he's decided someone deserves the truth and is working through exactly how much of it to give, careful pauses, measured sentences, the occasional stop where he'd look at his coffee cup and decide something internally before continuing. Ethan listened the way he'd always listened, which was completely. Not performing attention, not filling silences with his own voice because silence made him uncomfortable. Just listening, taking in everything, filing it, letting it connect to the things he already knew, the way pieces of a machine connect when you're laying them out before assembly. The Iron Reapers had started, Victor said, as a trafficking operation running product through the corridor between Mexico and Nevada. Small in the beginning, careful, the kind of organization that grew slowly because it never drew unnecessary attention. 7 years ago, they'd shifted models, less movement of physical goods, more control of infrastructure, the routes, the contacts, the people in mid-level positions who made things move. That shift had made them something different, something harder to dismantle because there was no single point of failure. You couldn't take down the head and watch the body die. The body had learned to operate without a head. Their leader, a man named Damian Cross, had been building toward something for 3 years. Victor didn't say exactly what, but the shape of it came through clearly enough, the kind of consolidation that happens when one organization decides it has gotten large enough to simply absorb what it used to negotiate with. The Hells Angels held territory and relationships that Cross needed access to. Victor had refused every approach, every offer, every arrangement that was presented to him in a language that made it sound like partnership and meant something else entirely. Lily had been the response to that refusal. He thought taking her would make me negotiate, Victor said, or break, one of the two. Which would have happened? Ethan asked. Victor looked at him steadily. Neither. Ethan believed him. Not because he thought Victor was without feeling. He could see clearly that the opposite was true, that whatever Victor Carter felt about his daughter ran deep enough to be geological. But because he understood from those 2 hours of listening that a man like Victor Carter had learned the hard way that breaking or negotiating under that kind of pressure didn't end the threat. It amplified it. It told the other side what worked. So you didn't give them what they wanted, Ethan said. I gave them nothing, and I moved Lily. A pause. 4 times. And someone kept telling them where she was. Yes. The words sat in the kitchen between them like something with mass. How many people know about this place? Ethan asked. Fewer than 10 who are not in this building right now. Victor's eyes were steady, and I've already started narrowing that. Ethan nodded slowly. He thought about the diner, about the SUV sitting in the parking lot with its lights off and its engine running and its window coming down 2 inches. About the particular patience of that, not a rushed ambush, not a panicked move. Planned, positioned. Someone had known she was there and had given enough lead time for that kind of setup. It wasn't a last-minute thing, Ethan said. Whoever told them they gave enough notice for a coordinated approach. Victor set down his cup. No, he said quietly. It wasn't last minute. He looked at Ethan for a long moment. You see things, he said. It wasn't a compliment exactly, but it was more like a notation. I notice things, Ethan said. There's a difference. Noticing doesn't always mean I know what to do with it. What would you do with it now? Ethan thought. I'd figure out who knew the timeline, not just who knew the location. Lots of people might have known the general area, but who knew the specific routine, what night she came, what time. He looked at his bandaged hand. Lily said she came every Wednesday. You'd have to know that to set up the way they set up last night. Victor was very still. Who knew her schedule? Ethan asked. I'm working on that. Is it someone you trust? The question was direct, maybe more direct than was appropriate given that Ethan had been in this man's house for approximately 8 hours, but Victor didn't flinch from it. It's someone I trusted, he said, past tense. Ethan heard it. He didn't push further. Lily came into the kitchen 40 minutes later, and the dynamic in the room shifted in the specific way that rooms shift when the person everyone has been silently organizing around actually arrives. She had changed clothes and pulled her hair back, and she looked in the morning light like someone who had slept badly and decided not to let that be visible in her posture. She moved with a kind of deliberate steadiness, not the tightly coiled vigilance Ethan had watched through months of Wednesday nights, but something different. Something that was steadiness by choice rather than steadiness from habit. Like she had made a decision at some point in the night to hold herself together and was honoring it. She looked at Ethan first, then at her father, then at the coffee maker, which she operated with the ease of someone who had made coffee here before and had opinions about how it should be done. Are we going to talk about last night? She said. We've been talking about last night, Victor said. I mean all of it. She turned around with her cup. The shooter, the leak, and the fact that Ethan is sitting at our kitchen table instead of being in a hospital or in his apartment or anywhere that is not a Hells Angels compound. He's here because it's the safest place for him to be right now, Victor said. I know why he's here. I'm asking if we're going to acknowledge what that means. What does it mean? Victor asked. She looked at her father with an expression that suggested she found the question slightly maddening. It means he's involved, Dad, whether he chose it or not, whether you asked him or not. She looked at Ethan. You understand that, right? This isn't something you get to walk back from easily. I figured that out around 1:30 this morning, Ethan said, and you're okay with it. He thought about it honestly. He appreciated that she'd asked the real question instead of the polite version. I don't know yet, but I'm not okay with it. She almost smiled. That's a very precise kind of uncertain. I'm a precise kind of person. She sat down at the table with them, not across from them, beside Ethan, which put Victor across from them both, and the geometry of it registered somewhere without being stated. Someone sold me out, Lily said. Someone who's been trusted. We don't know that yet, Victor said. We do know that. We're just figuring out who. Victor didn't argue. Ethan watched them, this particular dynamic, this father and daughter, working through something painful with the efficiency of two people who'd had difficult conversations before and knew how to move through them without losing each other. There was love in the room, and it was not gentle love, not soft-edged or decorative. It was the practical kind, the kind that stays. I want to be part of finding them, Lily said. No, c'est à my own. Dad? No. Victor's voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. You are not. They've been using me as a piece on a board for 8 months. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it was not. I've been moved and hidden and protected, and I am grateful I am, but I need to not just be the thing everyone is managing. She looked at her father. Let me help. Silence. Victor looked at his daughter for a long time. We'll see, he said. Coming from someone else, that might have been dismissal. Coming from Victor, it was clearly something else, an actual evaluation and process, a door left open rather than closed. Lily accepted it. Ethan watched this and filed it. Jawa. The thing about being somewhere new and unfamiliar, Ethan had learned over the years, was that the best way to understand it was not to ask questions about it. Questions made people guarded, observation did not. So Ethan moved through the compound that first day with open availability and no agenda, doing the only thing he knew how to do in a new environment, which was make himself useful and stay out of the way of things that weren't his business. He helped Dutch with inventory in the workshop at 9 in the morning, not because anyone asked him to, but because Dutch was doing it and clearly could use another set of hands, and Ethan could see that. He spent 2 hours handling parts and equipment with a familiarity that surprised Dutch. Ethan had worked on engines since he was 15, self-taught out of necessity, because when you couldn't afford to pay someone to fix something, You either learned to fix it yourself or you did without. Where'd you learn mechanics? Dutch asked. YouTube mostly. Some books. A lot of mistakes. Dutch grunted. Best education there is. At noon, a man named Ray Older with silver in his beard and a way of watching Ethan that was neither hostile nor welcoming, but something more like calibrated caution came into the workshop and leaned against the doorframe and said, "Victor wants you." Ethan put down the part he was holding and followed. What Victor wanted was for Ethan to sit with him and Cole and a third man named Santos while they went through a problem. The problem was not stated directly at first. It was presented sideways as a logistics question, as a personnel question, as a question about information flow and where things might have fractured. Ethan sat and listened and recognized what was happening, which was that Victor was thinking out loud in front of him, using him as a sounding board without quite admitting that was what was happening. He understood why. He was an outside perspective. He hadn't been inside the structure long enough to have loyalty to any particular piece of it. He couldn't be the leak because he'd had no information to leak. He could see the shape of things without the bias of having built them. "Walk me through the timeline," Victor said, directing it at Cole, but with one eye on Ethan's face. Cole walked through it, the 4 moves Lily had made, dates, locations, duration in each place, the people who had been informed at each stage, the decision-making process for choosing Raven Creek Diner as the low-profile daytime anchor point she could return to regularly. Ethan listened. He felt something start to form, not a conclusion, not yet. The shape of a question, an inconsistency. He almost didn't say it. He said it. The diner wasn't in the general rotation. Cole stopped. "What?" Victor said. "The other locations, you moved her between them on a schedule. The diner was separate. She went there on her own." Ethan kept his voice level. "So whoever told the Reapers about the diner wasn't tracking the main logistics. They were tracking her." The room was very quiet. "They weren't inside the planning," Ethan said slowly, working it through as he spoke. "Or if they were, they didn't use what they knew from the planning. They used something more personal. Someone close to Lily herself, someone who knew her habits." Victor looked at Cole. Cole looked at Santos. Santos said nothing. But something in Santos's face moved. Just slightly, just for a second. Ethan saw it. He said nothing. Filed it. Kept his face completely neutral. Victor said, "That's a different category of people." "Yes," Ethan agreed. He found Lily later in the afternoon sitting in a chair near a window with a sketchbook in her lap. He hadn't known she sketched. He watched her for a moment before she noticed him, her hand moving quickly across the page, confident, with the kind of practiced ease that comes from years of doing something rather than occasional dabbling. "You draw," he said. She looked up. "I draw." She closed the book slightly, not defensively, more out of habit. "Have since I was 6. It's how I process things." "What are you processing right now?" She considered whether to answer. "Last night mostly. The way things look right before something goes wrong." She paused. "Have you ever noticed there's a specific quality to air, right before something bad happens? Like everything gets hyper clear and very still at the same time." "Yes," he said. "I felt that in the parking lot." She nodded. "I'm trying to draw that. The feeling, not the thing." He sat down nearby, not so close it was presumptuous, close enough to be present. "How long have you been hiding?" he asked. 8 months. "What was your life like before that?" She was quiet for a moment. "Normalish. I was taking classes at community college, graphic design. I had an apartment with a roommate who thought my dad ran a trucking company." A small, complicated sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "I made dinner twice a week. I had a plant. I had a cat for about 3 months before my dad said it was a liability." A liability. His word. I maybe used a few other words in response. She looked at the sketchbook in her lap. "I miss my cat." Ethan looked at her. "What was its name?" "Piston." "You named your cat Piston." "My father's daughter," she said simply. "What can I say?" And there, right there, was the first time Ethan heard Lily Carter laugh. It was quick surprise out of her, gone almost before it arrived. But it was real, completely real, and it changed the room. He felt it like a recalibration. "You're going to get through this," he said, not as a platitude, as a statement of assessed probability. She looked at him. You sound very certain for someone who just learned about any of this 12 hours ago. I'm certain about some things fast. He met her eyes. This is one of them. She held his gaze for a moment longer than either of them had been holding eye contact since they'd woken up in this house. Then she opened her sketchbook again. Tell me something about you, she said. That has nothing to do with any of this. He thought about it. I fix things. Anything broken, it's almost a problem. Why almost? Because sometimes things are broken for a reason, and the person who owns them isn't ready for them to be fixed yet. He paused. I'm still learning to tell the difference. She looked at the page in front of her hand moved. That might be the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 8 months, she said. Maybe. The call came that evening, and everything moved 3 times faster than it had been moving. Victor took it in the main room with Cole and Santos present, and Ethan was in the hallway, and heard enough to know that someone had made contact. Not the Iron Reapers directly, someone between. A third party carrying a message. The message was simple. A meeting. Neutral ground. Damian Cross wanted to talk. Victor listened to the full relay without speaking. Then he said, tell him no. And he ended it there. Santos said, meeting buys us information. Meeting buys them time and gives them a look at our position. Victor said, we're not negotiating. We're not sending signals that we're open to something. So what are we doing? Cole asked. We're finding what they want us to find fast enough that they don't get to set the next move. Victor looked at both of them. I want everything on Santos's board for the last 6 months. Routes contacts the 3 people who knew about Lily's Wednesday schedule. Everything. Cole didn't react. Santos's jaw tightened. Victor noticed. Ethan in the hallway felt something cold move through him. He had been right about Santos's face. He didn't go to Victor immediately. He thought about it. He weighed the precision of what he'd observed against the very real possibility that he was a 19-year-old outsider reading something incorrectly, projecting patterns onto a situation he didn't fully understand, and that going to Victor with incomplete evidence would be worse than saying nothing. He went to Lily instead. He found her in the kitchen making tea, and he came in and closed the door and said very quietly, I need to tell you something, and I need you to help me figure out what to do with it. She turned around immediately. She read his face. What? When I was in that room with your father and Cole and Santos this afternoon, Santos's face moved. When I made the point about whoever tracked you being someone close to you personally, his face moved. Lily set down the kettle. Describe moved. Not a lot. A micro-expression, the kind of thing that happens before a person controls their face, like a word they almost said. She was very still. Santos has been with my father for 11 years, she said. I know. He was at my grandmother's funeral. I know. He taught me to ride a motorcycle when I was 14. Lily, he kept his voice steady. I know, and I might be wrong. I need you to help me think about whether I'm wrong before I say anything to your father. She stared at him. Then she did something he didn't expect. She sat down. She put both hands on the table. She breathed slow and deliberate the way she'd breathed on the diner floor. Tell me exactly what you saw, she said, from the beginning. So he told her. Everything. The sequence of the conversation, the point at which he'd made the observation, the specific quality of the expression, the direction it moved, how quickly it was controlled, what followed it in Santos's body language for the next 30 seconds. Lily listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. The Wednesday schedule, she finally said. The only people who knew I went to Raven Creek on Wednesdays were my father, Cole, and Santos. She paused. And me. Ethan said nothing. Cole is above reproach, she said. I don't say that because I like him. I say that because his entire life is in this chapter, in this community, and he has nothing to gain from what happened last night, and 3 people he loves who would be in danger if the Reapers ever got the leverage they're looking for. Which leaves Santos, Ethan said. Which leaves Santos. Her voice was controlled, not cold-controlled. Or me. You were the target. People do things that look like being the target to look less like the source, she said. The room went quiet. Ethan looked at her. Do you believe that about yourself? She looked at her hands on the table. No, she said. But I've learned to say it anyway because the people who think carefully about these things say it for you if you don't. He understood that. We go to your father, he said. Yes, she stood up. Together. Victor's reaction was not what Ethan expected. He expected an explosion, or a denial, or the particular violence of a man hearing something about someone he loved that he already suspected and didn't want confirmed. What Victor Carter did was become very, very quiet. He listened to everything Ethan said, and then he listened to everything Lily said, and then he sat with his hands on the table in front of him for 30 seconds. That felt much longer. Then he said to Cole, who had been standing by the door, "Get everyone out of the East Wing for the next hour. Routine maintenance check. Make sure Santos is in the garage." Cole left without a word. Victor looked at Ethan. "You sure?" "No," Ethan said. "I'm not sure. I'm telling you what I observed. You're the one who knows whether it fits anything else." Victor was quiet again. Then 3 months ago, Santos asked me about Lily's cover arrangements, said he wanted to understand the full picture in case something happened and he needed to make decisions fast. A pause. I told him enough to be useful. Ethan said nothing. 2 months ago, a contact who'd had dealings with the Reapers told me someone inside my organization was shopping information. I started internal review. Came up empty. Another pause longer. Because I was looking at the logistics track, not the personal track. Lily said very quietly, "Dad." "I know." His voice was rough around the edges. "I know." The thing Ethan witnessed in that moment was not rage. It was grief doing its initial pass through a person before rage had a chance to set up behind it. Victor Carter had spent 11 years trusting someone, and the information that this trust had been used as a knife was arriving in real time and doing what that kind of information always does, rewriting the past in a way that couldn't be unwound. "What do we do?" Lily asked. Victor straightened. The grief went somewhere internal, somewhere managed. "We find out exactly what he sold," Victor said, "and to whom, and what's already in motion because of it." "How?" He looked at Cole, who had just returned to the doorway. "Carefully," Victor said. They moved on Santos that night, not violently, not dramatically, with the specific methodical precision of people who understood that the value of a confirmed leak was not in punishing it immediately, but in using it in controlling what information moved through it and what didn't, in understanding what had already been compromised before deciding what came next. Santos was brought into a room. Victor sat across from him. Ethan was not in the room. He waited outside with Lily, who was not allowed in either, and who sat in the hallway with her back against the wall and her eyes on a fixed point and her jaw set with the particular tension of someone holding themselves together through the active effort of not allowing themselves to fall apart. Ethan sat beside her. They didn't talk for a long time. Then Lily said, "Santos came to my graduation, my high school graduation. He brought flowers, lilies." She paused. "Said he almost brought roses, but my name made the choice obvious." Ethan looked at her, said nothing. "I don't understand how someone does that," she said. "How you can care about someone enough to bring them flowers and also do what he did." "People hold contradictions," Ethan said. "More than we expect, more than we're comfortable with. That's not an excuse." "No," he agreed, "it's not. It still doesn't make sense to me. It shouldn't. If it made sense, you'd be a different kind of person." She turned her head and looked at him. "Why are you here?" she said. Not accusatory, genuine. "I'm here in this hallway. Here. You jumped in front of a window for me, and then you got in a car with my father's people at 2 in the morning, and you've been here for 18 hours operating like any of this is normal for you. None of it is normal for me. So why?" He thought about how to answer this honestly without it sounding like something it wasn't. "Because I can't look at a broken thing and walk away from it," he said. "It's a flaw. I've tried to fix it about myself and I can't." She stared at him. "You think this is broken?" "I think something's gone wrong and I think it can be made right, and I can't unknow that I think that." He met her eyes. "And I'm already here, and your father needs people who aren't already compromised." He paused. "And her heart." He stopped. "And what?" He looked at the floor. "And you seem worth it," he said. "All of it. Just worth it." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Lily looked at him for a long moment. "Nobody has said that to me in a very long time," she said finally, without wanting something from it. "I'm not finished wanting things in my life," he said. But right now, I'm not wanting anything from you. That's a different thing. She didn't respond, but she didn't look away from him either. Santos confessed, not everything at once, not in the clean, complete way that confessions happen in stories. He confessed in pieces over an hour with the fragmented quality of a man dismantling a structure that had taken years to build, working through layers of justification and denial before arriving finally at the actual truth. The actual truth was money, not ideology, not coercion, not threat money. A debt Santos had accumulated outside the chapter's over 3 years with people who had eventually identified themselves as connected to the Reapers. By the time he understood what was being asked of him, he was in deep enough that refusal felt impossible. So he had told himself it was just location information, just general data, just enough to satisfy the debt and no more. He had told himself a lot of things. Victor came out of that room looking like a man who had aged 4 years and 60 minutes. He stood in the hallway and looked at Lily and then at Ethan and then at the middle distance. They know about the compound, he said. Lily went very still. How much? Cole asked. Enough that we can't assume it's secure. Victor looked at Cole. We have 12 hours, maybe less, before they confirm we found Santos and move to whatever they plan to move to if this happened. What did they plan? Ethan asked. Victor looked at him. They planned for exactly this. Santos had instructions. If he went dark for more than 24 hours, a specific sequence of moves was supposed to happen automatically. A pause. The first move in that sequence is Lily. The hallway felt suddenly smaller. They're coming here, Lily said. They're going to try, Victor said. So we don't wait for them, Ethan said. Both Victor and Lily looked at him. You said Santos had instructions for a sequence. That means the Reapers built a plan around the assumption that if Santos went dark, they'd lost the inside track. They'd move immediately, but they'd move to Plan B. Ethan worked through it. Plan B is always less flexible than Plan A. It's predetermined, which means it has a structure you can anticipate. Victor studied him. And if you can anticipate the structure, Ethan continued, you don't defend against it. You move to meet it before it forms up. A silence. Cole looked at Victor. Victor looked at Cole. Some communication moved between them that didn't use words. He's right, Cole said. I know he's right, Victor said. He looked at Ethan Walker, 19 years old, bandaged, hand-bruised ribs, 22 hours into the most complicated situation of his life. Okay, Victor said, and the next phase of the war began. They moved fast. Victor briefed his most trusted riders, not the whole chapter, not yet, just the 8 men, whose reliability he could stake everything on, whose names did not appear anywhere in Santos's account of what he had shared. The compound would stay occupied, but minimally enough to look normal to any surveillance the Reapers might have on it. The real operation would move off-site. Lily was the hardest conversation. Victor told her she was moving again, and she looked at him for a long moment and said, I know. Just that. No argument this time. I need you somewhere completely clean, Victor said. No history with us, nothing they could have gotten from Santos. Who? She asked. Victor was quiet. Who knows somewhere clean? She pressed. Victor looked at Ethan. Ethan understood what was being asked. My mother's place, he said slowly. Ground floor apartment in Mesa. My name's on the lease, not hers. No connection to any of this. He paused. Though I need to tell her. She'll be safer with more people than without, Victor said. And I'll have 2 of my best men on the exterior. Nobody will see them unless they already know to look. Ethan thought of Sandra Walker, who had been sick for 2 years and was behind on her bills and had spent the last morning wondering why her son hadn't come home. He thought about what she would say. He thought about her face. She'll understand, he said, and then more honestly, she'll understand better than I will. Lily looked at him. Are you sure it's your family? You're not going there to create risk. You're going there because it's outside their map. He met her eyes. My mother would want to know I helped someone who needed it. She won't want to know anything else, and I won't tell her anything else. A pause. Okay, Lily said. Okay, Victor agreed. And for the second night in a row, Ethan Walker made a choice that moved his life further down a road he'd never planned to take. The difference was that this time he didn't have to think about it. He was already moving before the decision was made. which when he thought about it later was exactly how it had been at the beginning. Some people flinch, some people calculate, and some people, the rare ones, the ones who don't entirely understand what they're doing, but do it anyway, just move. Sandra Walker opened the door at 6:15 in the morning and looked at her son's face and said nothing for a full 3 seconds. Then she said, "Come inside." That was Sandra. She had always been that way, the kind of woman who read a situation through her son's eyes before she read it through her own, who understood that the first thing a person needed when they arrived somewhere looking like Ethan was looking was not questions, not alarm, not the particular kind of maternal panic that would make them feel worse about whatever they brought to your door. The first thing they needed was to be let in. Ethan came in. Lily came in behind him, quiet, pulling the jacket tight around her that she'd been wearing since the compound. Victor's men, two of them, Ray and a younger rider named Dex, stayed outside in a truck parked where they could see both ends of the block. Sandra looked at Lily, looked at Ethan, looked at his bandaged hand. "Coffee," she said, not a question, a prescription. She went to the kitchen. Ethan followed. Lily stood in the middle of the small living room, and Ethan watched her take it in the worn couch, the family photos on the wall, the plant by the window that Sandra refused to let die, even when everything else was difficult, the general atmosphere of a place that had been made into a home by effort and intention rather than money. Something in Lily's posture shifted. The compound had been secure, but it had not been soft. This place was soft. It had the quality of somewhere people actually lived, actually ate meals, and left things on the counter, and had conversations that weren't about strategy or survival. Ethan saw it register in her body like water. "Your mom," Lily said quietly when he came back. She didn't even ask. "She will," he said, "just not first." Sandra came back with coffee for all three of them and sat in her chair, the one she always sat in, angled toward the window, and looked at Ethan and said, "Tell me what you can." So he told her what he could, which was not everything, and Sandra understood that without being told. He told her that a girl he knew was in danger, that the danger was real and specific, that he needed Lily to stay here for a few days, where nobody who was looking for her would think to look, and that there would be 2 men outside that she should not worry about. Sandra listened to all of this, then she looked at Lily. "Are you hurt?" "No, ma'am." "Are you hungry?" Lily blinked. "I a little, yes." "Then we start there," Sandra said, and stood up and went back to the kitchen, and that was that. Ethan watched Lily watch his mother. He watched the expression on Lily's face do something complicated and quiet the way faces do when they're being moved by something they didn't expect to be moved by. He didn't name it, he just saw it. "She's remarkable," Lily said. "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "She really is." He got 2 hours of sleep on the couch before his phone pulled him back up. Victor's name on the screen. He was outside and answering before the second ring. "Yeah, we have the shape of their plan." Victor's voice was tight, focused, running on whatever the veteran version of adrenaline was. "Santos gave us the structure before we moved him. The Reapers have a secondary site, not their main operation, a staging location they use for enforcement actions. That's where they'll consolidate when they confirm Santos went dark." "How long until they confirm?" 6 hours, maybe 7. "We pulled Santos's phone and Cole's managing the response traffic to buy us time, but it won't hold past noon." Ethan looked at the street. The truck with Ray and Dex was there parked under a jacaranda tree, looking unremarkable. "So you have a window." "We have a window, and I need to move inside it." "What's the play?" Victor was quiet for a moment. "The staging location isn't just a base," he said. "Santos told us something he'd held back the first time we went through it with him. The Reapers have been using it to hold people." Ethan went still. "People, individuals they're using as leverage against other parties. Not just us. 3 separate situations from what Santos described. People who thought they were being used to control someone and ended up becoming the primary commodity." A pause. "If Cross moves everything to that location before we get there, it becomes a hostage situation with multiple layers." "So you hit it before he moves?" "We hit it in 4 hours, but Ethan..." Victor stopped. "What?" "Santos said Cross has a specific protocol for when he suspects a breach. He doesn't just consolidate, he escalates." Another pause heavier than the ones before. "He sends a message." Ethan understood before Victor finished saying it. "He'll come after Lily. Or send someone who will, to prove he still has reach, to demonstrate to his own people that a breach doesn't paralyze him. Victor's voice was steady, but the control in it was audible. I need to know she's secure. She's secure. You're certain. Ray and Dex are on the exterior. She's inside with my mother. The address has no connection to any of your operations. He kept his voice even. Nobody who knows anything about you knows about this place. Good. A pause. Stay with them, Ethan. You need everyone you have. I need Lily protected more than I need one more body on the operation. It wasn't an argument Ethan could win, and he recognized that. He also recognized that Victor was right. The people Victor was moving with were trained, experienced, and had run operations like this before. Ethan had jumped over a diner counter and asked the right question in a conversation. Those were different skill sets. Stay close to your phone, Victor said. I'll call when it's done. The line went dead. Ethan stood outside for a moment longer, looking at the street, at the morning light coming over the rooftops, at the ordinary Tuesday that the neighborhood was beginning to have around him, while somewhere across the city a clock was running. He went back inside. Sandra made eggs. This was so specifically Sandra, the capacity to respond to a crisis with food, not as avoidance, but as grounding, as the deliberate creation of normalcy, as a form of care that Ethan felt his chest do something uncomfortable when he came back into the kitchen and found Lily sitting at the small table while his mother stood at the stove. There's coffee on the counter, Sandra said without turning around. I know, Mom. You look like you slept for 45 minutes. 2 hours. That's a different way of saying the same thing. Lily was watching this exchange with the particular attention of someone studying a language they don't speak but want to. Her hands were wrapped around her mug. She looked less pale than she had an hour ago. The kitchen had done something to her, the warmth of it, the smell of it, the anti-strategic nature of a woman making breakfast, like the world was not on fire outside. Ethan sat down. Victor's moving in 4 hours, he said quietly to Lily. She set down her mug. Against the staging location. Yes. And we're staying here. Yes. She processed this. He watched her process it, the jaw tightening, the deliberate breath, the way she pushed against the containment, and then accepted what, because she was smart enough to understand that accepting it was the right move. What are the odds it goes cleanly? She asked. Victor's been doing this for 30 years, Ethan said. That's not an answer. No, he said, it's not. Sandra set plates in front of both of them and sat down with her own and picked up her fork, and in her absolute refusal to make the moment more dramatic than it needed to be, she did more for both of them than any words could have. They ate. The warning came from an unexpected direction. At 9:47 in the morning, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. The text was 4 words. They know the address. He read it twice. He was on his feet before the second reading finished. Lily, his voice was level. Get away from the windows. She was already reading his face. She stood up immediately. What? I don't know yet. Move. He went to the front window and looked through the edge of the curtain and did a rapid count of what was on the street. Ray and Dex in the truck. 2 cars he recognized from the neighborhood. 1 car he didn't. Parked half a block south, engine on. He called Ray. Ray picked up on the first ring. I see it. How long has it been there? 6 minutes. Didn't register as wrong until just now. Dark gray sedan, 1 occupant visible, possibly 2. Someone texted me, Ethan said. Unknown number. Said they know the address. Ray's tone changed. Unknown who? No idea. Could be Cross trying to spook us. Could be someone in his organization who doesn't want this to go any further. He thought of Santos, of the contradictions people hold. Could be anything. We can't treat it as a bluff, Ray said. No, we can't. Ethan was already calculating. Can you reach Victor? Victor's dark until the operation is complete. Cole's the contact. Call Cole. I'll manage here. He hung up and went to his mother's room where Sandra had taken Lily at his instruction, and he stood in the doorway and looked at them both. Sandra was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking calm in the way that required effort. Lily was standing by the far wall with her arms crossed and her eyes sharp. Someone may have this address, Ethan said. I don't know how. I need you both to stay in this room. The window is interior, facing no line of sight from the street. Do not open the door unless it's my voice. Ethan, Sandra started. Mom, please. She looked at him. She held his gaze for a moment with the expression she'd had when he was small, and she was trying to memorize his face against some future moment when she might need it. Be careful, she said, always. He closed the door and went to the living room. The next 18 minutes were the longest of his life since the diner. He stayed low, stayed back from the windows, kept his phone in his hand, and watched the street through the corner of the curtain and thought with absolute precision about what he knew and what he didn't. What he knew, someone had texted a warning. Someone might be outside. Victor's operation was running on a parallel track and wouldn't be reachable for potentially hours. Ray and Dex were trained and positioned, but were two people and had been partly neutralized by the visibility of their truck. What he didn't know how they'd gotten this address. The text could be real. The car could be surveillance and nothing more. The whole thing could be cross-throwing information they already had against the wall to see how it responded. Destabilization. Make them move. Make them break cover. Confirm the location by forcing a reaction. Don't react, Ethan thought, not the way they expect. He texted the unknown number back. 4 words. Who are you? Why? He didn't expect an answer. He got one in 40 seconds. Reaper's driver, not all of us want this. Ethan read it. Read it again. His heart rate climbed and he pushed it back down. He typed, how many coming? The response took longer. He counted the seconds. 14 of them. 3 vehicles, 20 minutes. Cross-ordered confirmation. They find her or they tell him the location's clean. Ethan looked at the clock. He looked at the door. He did the math. He called Ray again. 3 vehicles, 20 minutes or less. This isn't a bluff. We can hold the exterior. No, if this turns into anything visible on this street, it drags civilians in. My mother's neighbors. He thought fast. We need to make the location look already evacuated. What? They're coming to confirm. If they confirm she was here and is gone, Cross gets diminished returns. No hostage, no leverage, and he's already burning his operation window trying to chase a location that's cold. Ethan kept his voice steady. We don't need to fight them on this street. We need them to find nothing. A pause. That's not nothing, Ray said. No, it's a choice. He looked at Sandra's bedroom door. Give me 5 minutes. PM. He knocked and opened the door and looked at his mother and Lily. We need to move, he said. Both of you, right now. Lily was already standing. Where? There's a laundromat 2 blocks east. My mom's worked there for 3 years. She knows the back entrance and the owner keeps the office unlocked for her. He looked at Sandra. Mrs. Kellerman is there on Tuesdays. From 7 to noon, Sandra said, already on her feet. You walk normally. You go in the front through the laundromat straight to the back. You stay in that office until I call your phone. He looked at Lily. 2 blocks. Keep your hood up. Don't run. What about you? Lily asked. I'm staying here. Lily's eyes went sharp. Ethan, if I leave too, the apartment looks abandoned and they push further to confirm. If someone's here, it looks like normal occupancy and they have less reason to escalate. He held her gaze. I'm not engaging with anyone. I'm just being present. That's not, Lily. His voice was steady, completely steady. Your father asked me to keep you safe. This is how I keep you safe. Now, please go. She looked at him for a moment that was about 100 things at once. Then she went. He watched them leave through the front window. Sandra with her handbag, Lily with her hood up, 2 women walking at morning pace like they were headed anywhere in the world except away from danger. He watched them until they turned the corner. He exhaled. Then he sat down in Sandra's chair by the window and he waited. The 3 vehicles arrived in 17 minutes. 2 SUVs and a car, which bracketed the street in a way that was organized without being obvious, the kind of coverage that came from people who'd done this enough times to know how not to look like they were doing it. 4 men total on the street, the rest in the vehicles. Ethan tracked this through the curtain. The 4 men outside were performing the activity of being elsewhere, checking phones, walking slowly, looking everywhere but where they were looking. Ethan sat in the chair. He had turned on the television. Soft volume, something mundane, the kind of sound that came through walls. His phone buzzed, unknown number again. Leave the window, back of the apartment, now. He stared at the text. Then against every instinct, he moved to the back of the apartment. 30 seconds later, something came through the living room window. Not a weapon, not glass. A small electronic device that hit the floor and rolled under the couch and stayed there. Ethan pressed himself flat against the hallway wall and breathed. A listening device. They weren't here to take anyone. They were here to confirm the location was live and plant a device to monitor it, which meant Cross didn't have certainty about the address. He had a lead. He was trying to verify it, which meant the text had been real. And whoever was sending it was inside Cross's operation and had just prevented him from moving toward an address that was already cold. Ethan exhaled very slowly. He waited 7 minutes. Then the vehicles left. He did not move for another 5 minutes after that. Then he called Ray. "They're gone," he said. "I see them pulling." Ray's voice was controlled. "What happened in there?" "They planted a listening device. They're not sure about the address. They're monitoring, not moving." He pushed himself off the wall, "Which means we have time, but the apartment that burned, we can't come back here." "Understood. Tell Cole, Victor needs to know when he surfaces that his timeline may be compressed from a different direction." He was already moving through the apartment, taking stock of what mattered and what didn't. And Ray, "Yeah, someone inside Cross's operation texted me twice, warned me about the vehicles, told me to move back from the window." He held the phone. "There's a fracture in the Reapers. Someone in there doesn't want this to go any further." Ray was quiet for a moment. "That could be an asset," he said, "or a trap." "Yeah," a pause. "Both things can be true." "I know," Ethan said. "I'm working on which one it is." He got Lily and Sandra back 30 minutes later to a different location, a motel 2 miles east, that Ray had arranged in the meantime, paying cash, no names. Sandra had come back from the laundromat looking at her son with the particular expression she wore when she'd realized the situation was larger than he'd communicated, but she didn't say anything about it. She held his face in both her hands for a second, looked at him and said, "You're all right." "I'm all right," he confirmed. She let him go. Lily's eyes went immediately to his hands, then his face, then settled on the expression she was learning to read, the one that meant he'd done something difficult and wasn't going to leave with that information. "Tell me," she said. So he told her, the listening device, the texts, the 3 vehicles that had come and gone without finding what they were looking for. Lily listened with her arms crossed and her weight forward, like she was bracing into the information. "The text sender," she said. "You think they're real? Real enough to have known about the vehicles before they arrived. Real enough to have known exactly when to tell me to step back." He met her eyes. "Someone inside the Reapers is trying to limit the damage." "Why? Could be a lot of reasons. Personal lines they won't cross. Someone they know who'd be in the crossfire. Could be they've gotten close enough to the inside of this thing to understand what Cross is actually building, and they don't want to be part of where it goes." He paused. "Or it could be Cross running a game through a cutout to make us feel safe enough to stop moving." Lily thought, if it's Cross, what does he gain? Confirmation of the address through our reaction to the texts, or a false sense of security that makes us stay put instead of continuing to move. "But we moved anyway." "Yes. So if it's a game, it already failed." "So far." She looked at him for a moment. "You're good at this." The observation was simple, not flattering. "Just accurate." "I notice things," he said. "I told you. You told me there was a difference between noticing and knowing what to do with it." She tilted her head. "Seems like you figured out the second part." "Seems like," he said. "Or I got lucky twice." 3 times, she said. "The diner, this morning, the window." She held up 3 fingers, one at a time. 3 times you moved before the situation finished forming." He thought about that. "It's easier when something matters," he said. "Damn." Cole called at 1:17 in the afternoon. Ethan answered and heard immediately from the quality of Cole's voice that the operation had not gone cleanly. "Victor's okay," Cole said first, which told Ethan that the first thing he needed to know about the operation was the thing Cole said first, which told him what the rest of the call was going to contain. "We took the staging location. We got the people they were holding out of there. We stopped the consolidation." "But Cross wasn't there." Ethan sat with that. "He knew," he said. "He knew we were coming. Not the specifics, but enough. He was gone before we moved." Cole's voice was flat and controlled, which means Santos gave him a separate channel, a dead drop, something that didn't depend on Santos being actively available, a preset signal that triggered when Santos went completely dark. So Cross was already running when Victor hit the location. Already running, already gone. A pause. And he left people behind, not his people. Leverage. 3 individuals he'd been holding as control mechanisms. He left them there for us to find because he knew we'd find them and he knew what finding them would do. Ethan understood immediately. It slows Victor down. Victor finds those people, he can't just leave them. He has to deal with them, secure them, get them to safety. It costs time. And time is what Cross is buying right now, Cole said. He's in the wind, Ethan. We have his location from 8 hours ago, and that's it. What does Victor need? Victor needs the person who texted you. Ethan went still. You told Ray, he said. Ray told me. I told Victor. Cole's voice was precise. The text stopped. After the vehicles left this morning, yes. Try again. Now, right now. The urgency in Cole's voice was something Ethan hadn't heard from him before. If that person is inside Cross's organization and Cross is moving, that person is either already compromised or they're about to be. And if they have information about where Cross is running to, I understand, Ethan said. He pulled up the unknown number. He typed, Cross moved. Victor stopped the operation, but Cross is gone. Do you know where he's running? He stared at the screen. Nothing. 30 seconds. A minute. He was about to put the phone down when it buzzed. 40 minutes. I need to know she's alive. Ethan read it. He read it again. She. Not Lily, just she. Which meant the text sender wasn't referring to someone abstract. They were referring to someone specific. Someone they had a reason to need confirmation about. He typed carefully, she's safe. Who are you? The response came back in under 10 seconds, which was faster than any previous response had come. Cross took someone I need back. That was the real leverage. Everything else was cover. Ethan felt something shift in the entire structure of what he thought he understood. He typed, tell me who Cross took. The response, my sister, and below it an address. But Ethan called Cole before he called Victor. Not because he didn't trust Victor, because he understood that Victor was in the field managing the aftermath of the operation with people counting on his steady hand, and that getting this information to Cole first meant it could be verified and prepped before it reached Victor in a form that demanded immediate decision. Cole picked up. Ethan read the text out loud. Cole was silent for 4 full seconds, which was long for Cole. He kept a second location, Cole said. That's what it sounds like. Santos knew about the staging location. Santos gave us enough for that. But if Cross had a deeper location, a personal one outside the main operation, Santos either didn't know about it or didn't give it up. The text sender knows about it, Ethan said. Because whoever this is, Cross took their sister to that location. That's the real leverage. Not Lily. Cross used Lily as the visible target to control Victor, but this other person, whoever they are inside the Reapers, they've been operating under a different kind of control. Cross had 2 levers, Cole said. Santos inside Victor's organization, and someone inside his own organization controlled through a hostage nobody else knew about. Ethan held the phone. That's why the Reapers have been so coordinated. Cross wasn't just building an operation. He was building a closed system where everyone inside had something they couldn't afford to lose. Cole exhaled. The address. It's real or it's a trap. It's real, Cole said. Because if this person is inside Cross's organization and Cross is running, they just burned their cover to give it to us. Ethan thought about that, about the weight of it, about what it cost to send a text like that to someone you didn't know through a phone number that could be traced, giving an address that Cross would identify as a breach the moment the address was used. They're out of options, Ethan said, which makes them either exactly what they appear to be or exactly the kind of thing Cross would use when he had no other plays. Cole paused. Victor needs to make the call on this one. Get him the information. Already moving. Cole paused 1 more beat. Ethan, the text went to your phone. This person reached out to you. I know. Victor's going to want to use that. I know that too, Ethan said. He hung up and sat for a moment. Lily came and stood in the doorway. She had heard enough, not everything, but enough. He could see it in her face, the specific expression of someone who has been tracking the edges of a conversation through sound and tone alone and has assembled most of the picture. There's another location, she said. Yes. Cross is there. Probably. She looked at him. And someone inside his organization just gave it to you. Yes, she was quiet for a moment. My father's going to move on it, she said. Yes. And this person who texted you their sister is being held there. That's what they're saying. Lily looked at the floor, then at her hands, then at Ethan. It's not just about us anymore, she said. No, he said. It was never just about us. We're only now seeing the full size of it. She absorbed this. The people they found at the staging location, she said, Victor got them out. Yes. And if Cross has more people at the second location, then getting to Cross isn't just about stopping what's been happening to your family, Ethan said. It's about stopping what's been happening to everyone he's been using. Lily was very still. You understand what this does, she said. If this is real and Victor moves on it and it works, it's not just the Reapers losing. It's everyone Cross has been holding leverage over getting loose at the same time. Yes, that's going to be complicated. Extremely. And Victor's going to do it anyway. Yes, Ethan said. He is. She looked at him. And you, she said. What are you going to do? He thought about the text sender, about the address, about a person inside a criminal organization who had made 2 phone calls to a stranger because their sister was being held somewhere and they had run out of every other option. He thought about what Victor had said on the first morning. You see a person in danger and you move. Same thing I always do, Ethan said. Sure. Victor called 40 minutes later. His voice was tired. Ethan noticed not defeated, nothing like defeated, but carrying the weight of a day that had been longer than most in a life of long days. Cole got me everything. What do you think? Ethan asked. I think the address is real. And the trap possibility. Still present. We don't go blind, we go careful. A pause. I have 8 people I can move right now. The others are managing the people from the staging location. 8 is enough. Depends on what we find. Victor was quiet for a moment. Ethan, the text sender. Yeah, they contacted you. If Cross is at that location and he has eyes on his own perimeter, he'll recognize my vehicles. He'll recognize my people. Ethan understood exactly where this was going. He doesn't know my face, Ethan said. No, he doesn't. I'm a 19-year-old from Mesa who works at a diner. You were, Victor said, past tense. Ethan sat with the weight of what was being asked, the complete reality of it. No romanticized version, no version where it was simple or clean or where courage looked like a movie and not like a Tuesday afternoon in a motel room with bruised ribs and a bandaged hand. I'm not trained for this, Ethan said. No. Victor agreed, you're not. What you're asking is for me to be visible. What I'm asking, Victor said carefully, is for you to meet the text sender. Whoever they are, they reached out to you. They trust something about you, or at least they chose you. If they're at or near that location, a face they have already chosen to trust is more useful than 8 men they have never seen. And if it goes wrong, my people will be close. A pause. If you say no, Ethan, I will understand completely. This is not your obligation. This is not your war. Ethan thought about Lily in the next room, about Sandra who had let them in and made eggs and said, be careful, and meant all of it. About 3 people held at a staging location who were somewhere safe tonight because Victor Carter had moved in time. About a woman he didn't know whose sister was in a building with Damian Cross. About what it meant to notice things and then know what to do with them. What time do you need me? He said. Victor exhaled a sound so small and so controlled that only someone listening for it would catch it. But Ethan caught it. And in that smallest sound was the thing Victor Carter didn't say, which was, I see you clearly. I have seen you from the beginning, and you are more than you know. 2 hours, Victor said. I'll send Cole to bring you in. Okay. Ethan. Sir, you've already done the thing that mattered most. Victor's voice was quiet. Whatever happens tonight, you already did it. Ethan held the phone. Then he went to tell Lily. Lily did not take it well, not in the way of someone who fell apart. Lily Carter did not fall apart. It was not in her architecture, but in the way of someone who received information and immediately began fighting the implications of it with every reasonable argument she had available, which turned out to be several. You're not trained, she said. I know, Thaw. You said that to my father and he agreed with you, and he's still sending you. He's not sending me, he's asking if I'll go. There's a difference. There's always a difference between being ordered and being asked, Ethan said, and I said yes. She was on her feet, which was where she went when she was working through something that her body needed to move around. Ethan, 3 days ago you were wiping tables at a diner. I know what I was doing 3 days ago. And now my father wants you to walk into a situation where Damian Cross might be present and your father will have 8 people 30 seconds away. I'm not going in to fight anyone. I'm going to meet someone who chose to contact me. He kept his voice steady, not because he felt steady, he didn't entirely, but because the moment needed steadiness and he was the one who had to provide it. This person warned me twice. They gave us an address. They're doing all of that because their sister is in that building and they've run out of every other option. He looked at Lily. You understand that, right? The same way you understand it because you've spent 8 months being the person someone else is trying to protect. She stopped moving. That landed. He could see it land. That's not fair, she said. No, he agreed. But it's true. She stood there for a moment, jaw tight, looking at him with an expression that it was about 12 things at once and none of them simple. Come back, she said finally. Not a request. The particular intonation of a person who uses declarative sentences when they mean something they can't quite say directly. That's the plan, he said. I'm serious, Ethan. I know you are. He met her eyes. So am I. What? Cole arrived in a single unmarked truck at 3:45 in the afternoon. Ethan came out to meet him and Cole looked at him with the measured assessment that was Cole's permanent default expression and said, Victor briefed you on what we know. Yes, I'll brief you on what we don't know, which is more. Cole pulled out from the curb. The address is a commercial property warehouse space on the east side legitimate business front, been in operation for about 2 years. Cross bought the company that leases it through a third party. Our people didn't have it in any previous intelligence because it was clean enough to not register. How long has Cross been using it? Unknown. Could be the original fallback. Could be something he set up when the situation started escalating. Cole's eyes stayed on the road. The text sender we ran the number. Prepaid purchased in cash 6 weeks ago. It's a dead end on identity. So we don't know who we're meeting. We know they've been inside Cross's operation close enough to know his movement schedule, his vehicle count, and the address of a location that wasn't in any intelligence we had. Cole paused. That's either someone very highly trusted inside the Reapers or someone Cross was using so completely that they had access to everything without being officially in the structure. Ethan thought about that. You think it could be someone who's not actually a Reaper. I think it could be someone Cross recruited through pressure rather than loyalty. Someone he brought in and kept in through the hostage. Cole's voice was precise, which would explain why they're willing to burn it. If you're not there by choice, your loyalty has a breaking point. Ethan filed that. What do you need me to do? He said. Make contact. Confirm identity. Get anything they know about Cross's current position and the layout of what he's holding. Cole glanced at him briefly. You're not going inside the property. You're meeting this person at a contact point 2 blocks from it. Victor's people will be staged around the perimeter of the property itself, ready to move the moment we have confirmation. What counts as confirmation? Victor will make that call. A pause. He trusts you to relay accurately. Okay. Cole drove in silence for a moment. Then you scared, Ethan thought about honesty. Yes. Good, Cole said. People who aren't scared in this kind of situation make bad decisions. Fear is information. Use it. They drove the rest of the way without talking. The contact point was a small parking structure, the kind that belonged to a strip of commercial businesses and was half empty on a weekday afternoon. Ethan got out of the truck 2 blocks away, as Cole had instructed, and walked the remaining distance alone, hands in his jacket pockets, pace normal, watching without looking like he was watching. He found the level Cole had specified. He stood near the stairwell. He waited. 4 minutes. Then footsteps on the concrete ramp coming up from the level below. One set. Moving with the particular deliberateness of someone who is trying very hard to appear calm. The person who came around the corner was young. Younger than Ethan had expected, 23, maybe 24. A woman. Dark hair. A bruise along her left jaw that was several days old and had passed through the dramatic phase into the fading phase. She was wearing clothes that didn't quite fit the way clothes don't fit when they belong to someone else. She held herself with the specific tension of a person who has been operating in danger for long enough that tension had become their resting state. She stopped when she saw him, looked at him the way you look at someone you've been communicating with through a phone screen, trying to reconcile the abstract with the physical. "You're Ethan," she said. "Yes." "You're younger than I expected." "So are you." He kept his voice even. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Mara." "Last name?" Another hesitation, then Reyes. "Mara Reyes." He said it the way Victor had said his name on the phone, like writing it somewhere permanent. "Your sister is inside that property." "Yes." "Tell me about her." She blinked. "That's the first thing you ask. Who she is matters. It tells me if what you're saying is true." He held her eyes. "Tell me about her." Something in Mara Reyes' face broke slightly. Not dramatically, just at the edges. "Her name is Carmen. She's 20. She was in her second year at Arizona State." She stopped. "She has nothing to do with any of this. She doesn't know what I was doing. She doesn't know anything about Cross or the Reapers or—" She stopped again, pressed her mouth together, controlled it. "He took her 4 months ago. He told me what he needed from me. He said she was comfortable, she wasn't being harmed. She was simply unavailable until I completed what he asked." "What did he ask?" "Technical things. I worked in logistics software, route optimization. He needed someone who could make his shipment routes look like legitimate commercial traffic in the system. Clean the data." She looked at her hands. "I'm not a criminal. I was a person he found who had a skill he needed and a sister he could use." "And when did you start thinking about getting out?" Her jaw tightened. "When I realized he was never going to let Carmen go. That when you complete what I asked was something that kept moving. One thing became another thing became another." She looked up at Ethan. "And then I heard what he was doing to other people. The girl he was using against Carter, I heard them talking about what happened at the diner." She paused. "About the kid who jumped in front of the shot." Ethan was very still. "That was how I knew to contact you," she said. "They talked about you, who you were, where you worked, your name. Cross pulled everything on you because you were a variable he hadn't accounted for." She met his eyes. "You didn't run." That was what they kept coming back to, even when they were being tactical about it, planning how to manage you as a variable. There was something in how they talked about what you did. She paused. "I needed to know if that was real. If what was real, if a person could just do that, just move, without calculating what it cost them." Ethan looked at her for a moment. "I'm not special," he said. "I just can't walk past something broken." Mara looked at him. "Yeah," she said quietly. "That's what I decided." She told him everything she had in the next 14 minutes, which was more than Cole had expected and more than Victor had hoped for. The property layout, the number of people Cross had with him 7 down from his usual complement because he'd sent people to the address in Mesa and to monitor the aftermath of the staging location operation. The location inside the building where Carmen Reyes had been held. The specific section Cross was using as his personal base toward the back of the structure, away from the main entry. And the detail that changed everything. "He's planning to move it tonight," Mara said. "He knows Victor hit the staging location. He doesn't know about Santos yet, or he didn't as of 2 hours ago, but he knows the operation failed and he's cutting his losses. He has a vehicle arranged for 11 tonight. After that, he's gone." Ethan relayed all of it to Cole via text as Mara spoke, typing with one thumb, not breaking eye contact, capturing and transmitting simultaneously. It was a particular kind of multitasking, the kind you discover you can do when the stakes are high enough to unlock it. Cole's responses came back in shorthand. "Understood. Confirming with Victor. Stand by." "Cross himself," Ethan said. "Is he armed?" "Always." Mara's voice was flat. "He's the kind of man who treats being armed like other people treat wearing a watch. It's just on him." "How many people does he have on Carmen directly?" "One, rotating 2-hour shifts." She paused. "Right now it should be a man named Garrett. He's the one I trust least. He's been rougher with her than Cross wanted." Her voice went tight. "I complained to Cross about it. Cross said to manage my expectations." Ethan noted the controlled fury in those words, the way it was being held at a distance, because she needed to function and Fury was something for later. He recognized that. He'd been doing the same thing since the diner. His phone buzzed. Cole Victor is moving in 45. Needs Mara at a secondary point. Can you bring her? Ethan looked at Mara. I need you to come with me, he said, and where to the people who are going to get Carmen out. She went very still. Victor Carter, she said. Yes. A pause that lasted several seconds. He has every reason to be angry with me, she said. I helped cross-target his daughter. Under duress, Ethan said. That's a defense, not an absolution. He looked at her. You're right, it's not an absolution. But right now, Victor Carter is the person with 8 men in a 45-minute window and a genuine reason to want Damian Cross stopped before he gets in a vehicle tonight and disappears. He held her gaze. He's also the person who pulled 3 strangers out of a staging location today and made sure they were safe before he did anything else. That's who he is. Mara looked at the floor. My sister, she said. Yes, Ethan said, your sister. She made a decision the way real decisions are made, not dramatically, not with any visible revelation, just with a small shift in posture and a breath that carried more weight than most breaths do. Okay, she said. Jackman. Victor met them at a staging point 4 blocks from the property. He was standing outside the lead vehicle when Cole pulled up and Ethan watched him take in Mara Reyes. The bruise, the wrong fitting clothes, the controlled terror of a person trying to present as functional, and watched Victor's expression do something that was not anger and not softness, but something between them, the particular response of a man who had spent 30 years seeing people controlled through the people they loved. He looked at her and he said, your sister's name is Carmen. Mara stopped. How? Ethan texted Cole. Cole texted me. Victor's voice was direct but not unkind. She's in there. Yes. We're going to get her out. He said it with the particular certainty that comes not from arrogance, but from decision from the place where a person has made up their mind, and the outcome is an intention rather than a hope. I need the layout exactly as you gave it to Ethan. Walk me through it one more time. Mara walked him through it. Victor listened the way he always listened, completely without interrupting, with the kind of absorption that translated information directly into tactical planning without the intermediate step of needing to write it down. When she finished, he looked at Cole. Cole nodded once. 7 of us go in through the east access, Victor said. Dex and Ray hold the exterior perimeter, 1 vehicle on each exit road. He looked at Mara. Garrett, the one on Carmen, he's the variable. He's unpredictable, Mara said. When things go wrong, his first response is to make things worse. How does he react to authority, Mara thought. He postures, but he's afraid of Cross. Anyone who makes him more afraid of the immediate situation than he is of Cross can redirect him, Victor said. Yes. Victor looked at Ethan. Ethan understood the look. No, he said. Victor said nothing. I know you're not trained, Victor said. I'm not asking you to go in armed. I'm asking you to do what you've been doing for the last 2 days, which is be present and say the true thing at the right moment. He paused. Garrett doesn't know my face. He doesn't know Cole's face. But if Cross had intelligence on you, Garrett has seen that intelligence. He knows you're a civilian, someone who doesn't belong to any of this. And that is sometimes exactly the thing a man like Garrett responds to, because it doesn't fit his categories and it makes him hesitate. You want me to make him hesitate? I want you to buy Carmen Reyes 3 additional seconds, Victor said. That's all. 3 seconds is a great deal of time when 8 people are moving behind you. Ethan stood with that. He thought about a girl named Carmen who was 20 years old and at Arizona State and had nothing to do with any of this. He thought about what 3 seconds was worth. Stay directly behind me, Victor said. You do not move ahead of me for any reason. If I tell you to drop, you drop, immediately. No thinking. Understood. Ethan, I understand. Victor held his gaze for 1 more second. Then he turned to his people and the operation began. And I know. The next 22 minutes were the most clarifying of Ethan Walker's life. Not the most frightening, though fear was present. Not the most dangerous, though the danger was real and specific and located in his chest like a second heartbeat. Clarifying because moving through something real at that speed with that many people, depending on coordination and precision and the accuracy of the information Mara had given them, stripped away everything inessential. There was no room for doubt. There was no room for the version of himself that worried about what people thought, or whether he was enough, or whether he was in a situation above his competence level. All of that went somewhere very quiet and very far back, and what remained was simple and immediate and clear. Victor moved like water. That was the only way Ethan could ever describe it later. Not aggressive, not performative, just flowing through the space with the efficiency of someone who had spent 30 years learning exactly how much force a moment required and never using more than that. His people moved with him. 8 people moving as a single coordinated thing, each one knowing their position, their timing, their specific job. They found Garrett exactly where Mara said he would be. And here was the thing about the moment, the thing Ethan would think about later in the weeks and months that followed when he was trying to understand what had happened and why Garrett looked up when they came through the door and his hand went to his waist and his face did what faces do. In that first fraction of a second, it went to the highest threat in the room, which was Victor, and registered it and started calculating whether he could respond in time. And then Ethan stepped into his sightline, a 19-year-old with sandy hair and a bandaged hand and no weapon visible and no threatening posture. Garrett's calculation broke. Not long, not for long, but for 3 seconds he was recalibrating it around the anomaly of someone who didn't fit. 3 seconds was enough. Victor's people had Garrett before the recalibration completed. Carmen Reyes was in the back of the room, zip-tied to a chair with duct tape over her mouth, and 2 weeks of fear written in the way she was holding her body braced, contained somewhere internal that was safer than where she actually was. She looked up at the noise. She saw the men in leather colors. And then she saw Ethan, the anomaly, the thing that didn't fit, and something in her face broke open the way things break open when the thing you've stopped letting yourself hope for turns out to be real. Victor himself cut the zip ties. He did not leave that to someone else. He crouched in front of this 20-year-old girl he'd never met and cut the ties and pulled the tape free and said very quietly, "You're safe. We're getting you out. Your sister is outside." Carmen made a sound. It was the sound of someone who had been holding something enormous for a very long time, releasing it all at once. Not a word, not language, just the raw sound of relief, which is one of the most specific sounds a human being makes. Ethan stepped back. He pressed himself against the wall, and he let the trained people do what trained people do. And he breathed slow and deliberate, and he heard Victor's people moving through the rest of the building toward the back section, toward wherever Damian Cross was. Damian Cross was there. He had not run. This was the part that surprised Ethan, learning it after the part that told him something about Cross that the rest of the story hadn't fully communicated. Cross had stayed. He was in the back office, the one Mara had described, with one man beside him, and he was at a table with a laptop and a drink and the particular composure of someone who had made peace with a situation. Victor's people came in, and Cross looked up, and he looked at the 8 people in the room, and he said nothing. He didn't draw. He didn't threaten. He didn't do any of the things that might have been expected of a man with his reputation. He closed the laptop. "Carter," he said. "Cross." Victor's voice was the flattest Ethan had ever heard it. "I assume Santos talked." Santos talked. Cross nodded slowly, not surprised, resigned. The way men get resigned when they have run out of the moves they prepared and the remaining moves belong to someone else. "Your girl's alive." "I know. She's on her way out of the building." A pause. "So it's done," Cross said. "It's done," Victor agreed. Cross looked around the room, at the 8 men, at Cole, at the careful, exhausted, precise way Victor Carter stood across from him. "You gonna do this here?" Cross said. "No," Victor said. Something moved through Cross's face. "No. I'm going to give you to the people who've been building a case on your operation for 2 years. Victor held Cross's eyes without any expression at all. "There's a federal task force. They have enough from the staging location today to move, and they're going to have everything else before morning." Cross stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely." "I'd have thought you'd want what I want," Victor said quietly. "Doesn't matter more than what's right." He paused. "And I learned that from someone who learned it in about 48 hours, which frankly is faster than it took me." Cross looked at the door, at the general vicinity of somewhere behind it. "The kid," he said. Victor said nothing. "The diner kid." Cross's voice was measured. Not contemptuous, almost in a strange way honest. He's been in this building. He has. Did you bring him because you knew it would mean something? Or did it mean something because you brought him? Victor was quiet for a moment. He brought himself, Victor said. That's been true from the beginning. Cross absorbed this. Then he put his hands on the table, palms flat, in the specific gesture of a man who is done. All right, he said. Brotherhood. The federal contacts arrived 40 minutes later. 2 years of case building and the night's events. The staging location. The people recovered from it. The secondary location. Cross himself compressed the final phase into something that moved fast by the standards of institutions that generally move slowly. Ethan stood outside the building in the night air and felt the adrenaline begin its long recession and become something else, something that didn't have a name he knew, but sat in his chest with a weight that was not unpleasant. He heard footsteps. Mara Reyes came and stood beside him. Carmen was with Victor's people being looked over by a medic that Cole had arranged. She was physically okay. As Cross had said, though okay was relative and would need definition over time. Mara looked at the activity in front of them, the vehicles, the suits, the men with the Hells Angels cuts, standing at a careful distance from the federal people, with the practiced indifference of men who coexisted with law enforcement through mutual understanding of what each side could and couldn't do. Is it always like this? Mara asked. I've been involved in this for 3 days, Ethan said. She almost laughed. Right. They stood in silence for a moment. Thank you, she said. You did the hard part, Ethan said. You made the call. Twice. You answered. Anyone would have answered. No, she said. They wouldn't. That's why I chose you. He looked at her. How did you know I'd answer? She thought about it. Because they told me you jumped in front of a window for someone you barely knew. And the way they talked about it, they were trying to be strategic about it, trying to reduce it to a tactical variable, but underneath that, they didn't understand it. She paused. And I decided that someone these people couldn't understand was probably the kind of person I needed. Ethan stood with that. Carmen's going to need support, he said. Both of you will. I know. There are people who help with that. Victor, he stopped, reconsidered. I can ask Victor if you want. He knows people who've been through things like this. Mara looked at him. You're offering that? Yes. Why? Because you needed help and you reached out, he said. And I think you're probably going to keep needing help for a while, and reaching out is going to keep being hard. He met her eyes. So I'm making it easier. She looked at him for a long moment. You really are what they couldn't understand, she said. Behind him, he heard Victor's voice talking to someone, the low, steady cadence of it carrying through the night air without the specific words. He heard Cole's measured responses. He heard from somewhere inside the building a sound he didn't immediately identify. And then, did Carmen Reyes talking to someone on a phone, her voice rising in the specific way voices rise when the person you're calling answers, and you've been waiting to hear their voice for 4 months. He heard Mara exhale beside him. He looked at the sky above Phoenix. Victor found him 20 minutes later, standing by one of the trucks. The business around them was winding into its procedural phase, the part where institutions took over, and the people who'd created the opening stepped back. Victor moved through it with the practiced invisibility of a man who understood when to be present and when to let things run without his visibility on them. He stood beside Ethan. He looked at the same piece of sky. Cross cooperated, he said. I heard. Gave them the full structure of the operation. Names wrote the complete picture. He's going to spend the rest of his life in a room someone else controls. A pause. He said something before they took him. What? Victor was quiet for a moment. He said the thing he never accounted for was someone who moved before they calculated what it cost them. He paused. He spent his whole life operating on the assumption that everyone calculates first. That everyone, when it comes down to it, looks out for themselves before they look out for anyone else. Ethan said nothing. He said one person who doesn't do that breaks the whole model, Victor continued, because all of his leverage was built on the assumption that everyone had a price and everyone could be made afraid. And a person who jumps in front of a window before they know what it costs them doesn't fit the model. He looked at Ethan. He said you broke his math. Ethan stood with that for a moment. I just moved, he said. I know. Victor's voice was quiet. That's what broke it. The night air was still and warm, the way Phoenix nights could be warm, the kind that sat on your skin without pressing too hard. Somewhere down the block, a car was running with its radio on something low and indistinct, too far away to identify. "What happens now?" Ethan asked. "Now," Victor said, "the things that needed stopping have stopped." He looked at the building. The people who needed to be out are out. The evidence that needed to reach people who could use it has reached them. He paused. And a 19-year-old who came to work a late shift 3 days ago is standing in a parking lot at night, having done something that most grown men who've spent their whole lives in this world couldn't have managed. "I had help," Ethan said. "Yes," Victor agreed. "You did, and you used it." He looked at Ethan directly. "There's something I want to say to you, and I'm going to say it plainly because I don't have any use for indirection." Ethan waited. "You came into this because of one moment, one instinct. You didn't know my daughter. You didn't know me. You didn't know anything about what you were jumping into the middle of." Victor's voice was even. "And then you kept choosing. Every time there was an exit, you chose to stay. Every time the situation gave you a reason to step back, you moved forward." He paused. "That's not instinct anymore. That's character." Ethan said nothing. "I want you to know," Victor said, "that what you did, not just the diner, but all of it, changes things. Not just for my family, for the people in that staging a location, for Carmen Reyes, for whatever comes next for Mara." He was quiet for a moment. "You didn't set out to do any of that. You set out to get a girl down from the line of fire." "That's all I did," Ethan said. "No," Victor said. "It was never all you did. The first thing just started it." They stood in silence. Then Victor said, "Lily asked me to tell you she's been driving Cole's second contact phone crazy for the last 3 hours." Something moved through Ethan's chest. "Is she okay?" "She's Lily." The corner of Victor's mouth moved. "She's fine. She's also going to have things to say to you that I am not going to be in the room bar." He paused. "She also told me, and she made me promise to say this exactly, that if you did something stupid and came back injured, she was going to be angry at you for approximately 1 week before she forgave you, and I should warn you in advance so it doesn't catch you off guard." Ethan looked at the sky. "I'm not injured," he said. "I told her that. She said she was still reserving the right." Something that had been clenched in Ethan's chest since 3:45 that afternoon unclenched itself. Not all at once, in stages, like a fist opening finger by finger. He thought about Lily in the motel room, watching the clock, holding herself together through the force of deciding to. He thought about Sandra making eggs. He thought about Mara in a parking structure, with a bruise on her jaw, choosing to trust a stranger because the alternative was worse. He thought about Carmen Reyes, 20 years old, her voice going up on a phone call to someone she'd been waiting 4 months to reach. He thought about what Victor had said. One person who doesn't calculate breaks the whole model. "I need to call my mother," Ethan said. "Yes," Victor said. "You do." And for the first time since the diner window had exploded 3 days and a completely different life ago, Ethan Walker smiled. Not a big smile, not dramatic, just the quiet, genuine, deeply relieved smile of a person who has come through something and is beginning to understand what they've come through. Victor saw it. He didn't say anything about it, but he reached out and put one hand on Ethan's shoulder, brief, solid, the weight of something that didn't need to be named to be understood, and then he walked back toward his people. And Ethan pulled out his phone and called Sandra Walker, who answered on the second ring and said, "Ethan," in the voice she used when she'd been awake worrying. And he said, "Mom, I'm okay. I'm completely okay." And she said, "I know, I always know, come home." And he said he would, and he meant it. And the night around him was full of the particular sound of a situation that had broken towards something better. Not perfectly, not cleanly, not without cost, but undeniably, irreversibly better. Sandra Walker had a rule about certain conversations. The rule was that they happened at the kitchen table with coffee in the morning after sleep, because her experience with her son was that Ethan could manage anything in real time, but needed the quiet aftermath to understand what it had cost him. She had learned this when he was 11 and his father left, and Ethan had spent 2 weeks being completely functional and helpful and fine. Right up until the morning, he sat down at the kitchen table with his cereal and simply started crying without any preamble, and Sandra had understood then that her son processed in delay, that the interior accounting happened after the external situation had been handled, and that the best thing she could do would be present for that accounting when it arrived. She was present now. Ethan came home at 11:30 at night, and Sandra did not make him talk. She made him eat leftover soup, the kind that didn't require explanation or appreciation, and she sat across from him while he ate, and she did not ask questions. She had learned that too. Questions pulled things out before they were ready to come, and things that came before they were ready came out wrong. Lily was asleep in the spare room. Ethan ate the soup. And then without Sandra asking anything, he started talking. He talked for 40 minutes. He told her almost everything, not the operational details, not the specifics that weren't his to share, but the shape of it, the texture of it, what it had felt like to move through 3 days of something that had no precedent in his experience, and to keep choosing to stay in it when every rational calculation offered him a reason to leave. Sandra listened without interrupting. When he finished, she picked up her mug and held it in both hands and looked at her son across the kitchen table and said, "You were scared." "Very. And you went anyway." "Yes," she nodded, not approvingly or not only approvingly, but with the particular nod of a woman who had spent 2 years being scared and going anyway, who understood from the inside what it cost, who knew that the amount didn't diminish the choice, but was part of it. "Your father never would have done that," she said. It was not a cruel thing to say. It was an honest thing said quietly, and Ethan received it quietly. "I know," he said. "You chose differently than he did." She set down the mug. "Every single time over 3 days, you chose differently than he would have." Ethan looked at his hands. The bandage was starting to look worn, and he'd need to replace it in the morning. "Is that what this was?" he said. "Proving something." "No," Sandra said immediately. "That's what makes it mean what it means. You weren't proving anything." She looked at him. "You were just being who you are." He sat with that. Then Sandra said, "Lily." Just the name. The way she'd said, "Come inside" 3 nights ago, not a question, just a placement of something in the air between them. Ethan looked at the table. "Yeah." "She looks at you," Sandra said. "Mom, I'm not making it into something. I'm telling you what I observe." Sandra's voice was level. "She watches the room and she watches the door the way you told me she always has, and then she watches you, and it's a different kind of watching." Ethan didn't respond. "You look at her too," Sandra added. "I know," he said. "That's all I'm going to say about it." "Good. For now," she amended. He almost smiled. Sandra reached across the table and put her hand over his, the unbandaged one, for just a moment. Not long, just long enough to be felt. "Go to sleep," she said. "Everything else is still going to be there in the morning." He went to sleep. For the first time in 3 days, he slept without the part of his brain that wouldn't stop running. Lily was awake when he wasn't. He discovered this at 6:14 in the morning when he came into the kitchen and found her already there sitting in Sandra's chair, with her sketchbook open and a cup of coffee in her hand, and that look on her face that he had learned to read as the aftermath of a night she hadn't entirely slept through. She looked up when he came in. She looked at him the way his mother had described. Then she said, "You're not hurt." "I told you I wasn't." "You told Cole to tell me that." "Cole relaying information from you is a different category of certainty than seeing it myself." She looked at his hands, his face, the way he was moving. "Sit down, I'll get you coffee." He sat. She got him coffee, which was a small thing and a significant thing simultaneously, the way small things often are when they arrive from the right person at the right moment. She sat back down. "Tell me," she said. So he told her. The parking structure, Mara Carmen Garrett and the 3 seconds cross in the back office with his laptop and his drink, the hands on the table, palms flat. He told her the way he told her things from the beginning, directly without dramatizing it, without the version that made him look better or worse than he'd been. Just the sequence of what happened and what he'd thought and what he'd chosen. Lily listened to all of it. When he finished, she said, "He surrendered." "Yes." "Cross, he didn't fight." "No," she was quiet for a moment. "What do you think that means?" "I think," Ethan said slowly, "it means he understood it was over, and he decided that going down fighting serves ego, and going down cooperating serves whatever's left of his future." He paused. "Or he was never as committed to the identity he'd built as the identity needed him to be." "Some people build something hard on the outside because the inside couldn't hold it together," Lily said. "Yes. My father says most violence comes from that." Your father has been paying attention for a long time. She looked at her coffee. He also said something to me last night when he called. After the operation. Ethan waited. He said, and this is a direct quote because my father is not usually a person who says things you need to quote, but this one I needed to quote. He said, the boy sees people. Most people see situations. He sees the person inside the situation. That's rarer than anything I can teach. She looked up at Ethan. He was talking about you. Ethan said nothing for a moment. He's being generous, he said. He's not, Lily said. My father doesn't do generous for its own sake. He's precise. She held his gaze. You do see people. You saw me for months before any of this. Not the problem to protect. Not the complicated situation, just meet Yam. She paused. And you saw Mara and Carmen. And you saw Cross's people as people with breaking points instead of obstacles. I'm not a strategist, Ethan said. No, she agreed. You're something else. She looked at the table for a moment. Ethan, I need to say something. Okay. I've spent 8 months being moved around and protected and managed. And I understood why. I still understand why. My father did what he did because he loves me, and because the threat was real, and because he knew things I didn't know about how bad it could get. She stopped, chose her next words carefully. But in 8 months of being protected, nobody once asked me what I needed. Not what I needed tactically, what I needed. She looked up. You asked me the first night in the kitchen what my life was like before. You asked me what I missed. You asked about my cat. Ethan said Piston. Piston, she confirmed, and the smile was brief and real. You asked about my cat. And I know that sounds like a small thing. It's not a small thing, he said. It's not, she agreed. It's the thing that tells you what kind of person someone is. Whether they see you as a problem to solve or a person to know. She looked at him steadily. I want to know you, Ethan Walker. Not because you jumped in front of a window for me. Not because of what happened after. Because of the person I watched for 3 days, who keeps choosing the thing that costs more because it's the right thing. She paused. Is that something you want? He looked at her. He thought about Wednesdays, black coffee and toast, the corner booth, the way she watched the door and the way he'd positioned himself at the end of the counter without making it visible. The blanket he'd brought her without explanation. Everything that had been building in the unremarkable, uncelebrated space of an ordinary diner on an ordinary night before any of this happened. Yes, he said, that's something I want. No decoration, just the truth. She nodded, like receiving confirmation of something she'd already assessed as probable. Then she picked up her sketchbook and turned it around and set it on the table in front of him. It was a drawing of the diner. Not photographic, her style was looser than that, more impressionistic, capturing feeling rather than detail. But it was unmistakably Raven Creek. The counter, the booths, the window light. And in the corner booth, a figure, seen from across the room, small but specific. A young woman with her back to the wall and her eyes on the door. And at the counter, barely there, just suggested in a few lines someone positioned where he could see her. When did you draw this? He said. 2 months ago, she said. The night I realized I'd started waiting for Wednesdays. He looked at the drawing for a long moment. Can I keep it? He asked. I drew it for you, she said. Victor arrived that morning at 9 o'clock, and the atmosphere in Sandra Walker's small apartment shifted the way atmospheres shift when someone with genuine gravity enters a space not intimidatingly, not presumptuously, but with the weight of a person who occupies more of a room than their physical presence accounts for. Sandra met him at the door. Victor Carter looked at Sandra Walker, laundromat worker, the woman who'd been sick for 2 years. The woman who had opened her door at 6 in the morning for a girl in trouble and made eggs and said, be careful, and meant it, and something in his face did what it rarely did in the company of people he didn't know. It opened. Mrs. Walker, he said. Sandra, she said, come in, there's coffee. He came in, he sat at the kitchen table. He accepted the coffee. And then he said, your son is the most remarkable young man I've encountered in 30 years of paying attention to what people are made of. Sandra looked at him across the table. I know, she said, simply, without false modesty, without performance. Victor looked at her for a moment, and then unexpectedly, he smiled. You raised him to be that. I raised him as best I could, she said. He decided the rest himself. That's also parenting, Victor said. They looked at each other, two people who had raised children into something specific through difficulty, who understood the particular cost of that, who did not need to explain it to each other. Ethan came into the kitchen and found them at the table together and stopped in the doorway. Victor looked at him. Sit down, he said. We need to talk about what comes next. What came next was larger than Ethan expected. Victor talked for 30 minutes, and what he laid out was not a simple thing. The Iron Reaper's operation was broken, that was done, and the federal case that was building around Cross's cooperation would handle the remaining pieces over months of legal process that didn't require Ethan's involvement. The people recovered from both locations were being supported by organizations. Victor's chapter had relationships with, not quietly, not unofficially, but through the kind of structured community connections that exist when an organization has spent decades building actual relationships with the people around them. The motorcycle repair program was the first thing Victor named specifically. We've been running it for 6 years, he said. Youth outreach, adult retraining veterans coming back who need something to do with their hands that connects to something real. The man who's been running it is moving to Flagstaff. He looked at Ethan. The program needs someone with mechanical ability, patience, and the specific skill of looking at a person and seeing what they need rather than what they look like. Ethan said, You're offering me a job. I'm offering you something more sustainable than a late shift at a diner, Victor said, and more aligned with what you actually are. He paused. It pays, enough for you to finish your classes, enough for your mother's situation to stabilize on its own, which it will now do regardless because the debt is paid and has been, but I mean for the future. Ethan looked at the table. He thought about Gerald and the diner and the sticky lock on the front door that he'd been meaning to fix since September. He thought about 8 months of watching a corner booth and bringing coffee and being the person nobody remembered. He thought about what it had felt like to have something matter, to be somewhere that needed what he specifically had to offer, not just his willingness to show up. He thought about a program full of broken things waiting for someone patient enough to repair them. Yes, he said, for the second time that morning, just the truth without decoration. Victor nodded, then he looked at Lily. Lily, who was watching her father with an expression that was waiting for the next thing. You, Victor said to his daughter, are going back to school. Lily opened her mouth. Not negotiable, Victor said. The threat is neutralized. Cross is in federal custody and cooperating. The Reapers don't have a structure left that has any reason to focus on you. He looked at her steadily. You have a life, Lily. You put it on hold for 8 months because you had to. You don't have to anymore. She looked at him for a long moment. Arizona State this time, she said. Not community college. I'm not going backwards. Victor's eyes moved slightly. Fine. And I keep the sketchbook. She glanced at Ethan. Some of it. The sketchbook has never been a negotiating point. I know. I just wanted to say it. She looked at her father with the expression she wore when she was choosing her battles, and this one wasn't it. Okay. Okay, Victor said. Sandra refilled everyone's coffee. The morning light in the apartment was doing what morning light does when it finds a space that has been through something. It made everything look specific and clear, and slightly new the way things look after rain when the air has been cleaned of what was in it. 3 weeks later, Ethan Walker stood in a workshop that smelled like engine grease and metal. In the particular dry heat of an Arizona morning, watching a 17-year-old named Marcus attempt to diagnose a carburetor problem with the focused frustration of someone who knew the answer was in reach but couldn't find it yet. Stop looking at it like it's broken, Ethan said. Marcus looked up. It is broken. It's malfunctioning. That's different. Broken means something is missing or destroyed. Malfunctioning means something is there, but not working the way it should. He crouched beside the engine. If something's there, you can find it. You just have to ask the right question. Marcus looked at the carburetor. What's the right question? Not what's wrong with it. What is it trying to do that it can't do? Ethan pointed. Start there. He watched Marcus recalibrate. Watch the frustration shift into something more like curiosity. Watch the 17-year-old, whose file included 2 school suspensions and a juvie record for an incident he'd been forthcoming about, and clearly not proud of, watch this kid start asking the right question. The program had 12 participants currently, 3 veterans, 4 adults in job retraining, 5 young people from the surrounding area who had found their way here through various channels, school counselors, community workers, one through a legal arrangement that Victor's chapter had been instrumental in negotiating as an alternative to something worse. All of them at various points had sat across from Ethan Walker and experienced the specific effect of being looked at by someone who was not calculating their value or their risk, but simply seeing them. Word traveled. It always did. The program had a wait list by the end of the second week. Dutch, who came by twice a week to provide expertise on specific mechanical problems beyond Ethan's current knowledge base, watched this development with the particular satisfaction of a man who had been around long enough to recognize something real when it appeared. "You know what you're doing?" Dutch asked one afternoon. "Approximately," Ethan said. "That's the right answer," Dutch said. "The people who say they know exactly are the ones who stop learning." Mara Races came by the program on a Thursday afternoon in the 4th week. She came quietly the way she did everything Ethan had learned this about her over the 3 weeks since the night at the warehouse, through the occasional texts and one phone call where she had asked him with the directness of someone who had stopped having the energy for indirection how he was actually doing, and then listened to the actual answer. She stood in the doorway of the workshop for a moment before he noticed her. He was helping a veteran named Phil work through the logic of an electrical system, not doing it for him, walking alongside him, which was the thing that distinguished teaching from performing, and which Ethan had discovered he had a natural instinct for. He excused himself and came to where Mara was standing. She looked better. Not fixed, that word didn't apply to what she'd been through, and Ethan was learning to stop applying it to people, but better, more present. The tension in her body had dropped several degrees, enough that she moved differently, occupied space differently. "Carmen starts class Monday," she said. "Arizona State." He already knew because Lily had mentioned it. "Arizona State." A pause. "Same school as your—" She stopped, reconsidered the word choice. "As Lily." "I know," he said. "Lily's already made contact. They've had coffee." Mara stared at him. "When quoi?" "Tuesday. Lily texted me after. Said Carmen seems like someone worth knowing." Mara absorbed this. She stopped. "That's more than I expected." "Lily's like that," Ethan said. "She decides what she thinks about a person and she acts on it directly." Mara looked at him. "She decided what she thinks about you," she said. "Yes," he said simply. Something in Mara's face softened in a way that wasn't quite a smile but was adjacent to one. "Good." She looked around the workshop, at Marcus still working the carburetor, at Phil and his electrical diagram, at the general atmosphere of the place, purposeful, patient, warm, in the way places are warm when the person running in them has warmth to give. "This is real," she said. "What you're doing here?" "I just notice what people need," he said, "and try to be useful in the direction of it." "That's everything," she said. "You understand that, right? That's not a small thing you're describing. That's the whole thing." He looked at the workshop, at Marcus, who had just found the problem with the carburetor. He could tell from the way the kid's posture changed and was now looking at Ethan with the expression of someone who'd found something they needed him to confirm. "Give me 1 second, Ethan said to Mara. He walked over to Marcus. "Found it," he said. "I think so." Marcus pointed. "Here, the needle's worn. It's not holding the fuel level steady, so the mixture's inconsistent." Ethan looked at it. "Yes," he said, "just that. Just a confirmation." He didn't add to it, didn't explain what Marcus had already explained, didn't reduce it by over-explaining. Marcus looked at the engine. Then he said, "Can I fix it?" "That's the question you should always be asking," Ethan said. "And yes, walk me through how." He stood beside Marcus while the kid walked him through it, and he listened the way he always listened, completely, with the patience of someone who understood that understanding arrived at its own pace and couldn't be rushed without being damaged. When he turned back, Mara was watching from the doorway with an expression he'd seen before in other people in the last month. It was the expression of someone witnessing something they didn't have a word for, but recognized as important. "I need to ask you something," she said when he came back. "Okay." "Victor Carter, the people in his chapter." She paused. "I helped cross-run operations against them. I didn't have a choice, but I did it. And now I'm watching what they built here and what you're building, and I need to know." She stopped, pressed through it. Is there a way back from something like that? Is that a thing that exists? Ethan thought about Santos, who had been trusted for 11 years. He thought about Cross, who had surrendered with his hands flat on the table. He thought about Phil, the veteran in the workshop, who had told Ethan on his second day what he'd done in his worst years, and then waited visibly braced for the response. He thought about what he'd told Lily the first night in the kitchen. Broken things aren't worthless, he said. They just need someone patient enough. Mara looked at him. That applies to people too, she said. It started with people, he said. The engines were secondary. Victor Carter came to the workshop on a Friday at the end of the first month. He didn't announce it. He simply appeared in the afternoon the way men like Victor appeared, with a particular quality of presence that didn't require announcement, that rooms simply reorganized themselves around. He stood and watched the program run for 45 minutes. He watched Ethan with Marcus. He watched the veteran Phil, who had made more progress in 4 weeks than he'd made in the 18 months before that by his own accounting. He watched the 5 young people, each of whom moved differently in the space than they had on their first day, less defended, more present, more willing to ask questions that exposed what they didn't know. He watched Ethan move through all of it. When the afternoon session ended and the participants had gone, Victor sat down on a workbench and looked at Ethan, who was cleaning up with the ease of someone doing something that had already become natural. I want to talk to you about the chapter, Victor said. Ethan looked up. Not membership, Victor said, immediately reading what was on Ethan's face. I know who you are. You're not a writer. You were never going to be a writer, and I'm not asking you to be something you're not. He paused. But what you're building here is part of something we've been trying to build for years. And the people in my chapter, the ones who've been doing this work, they need to know that what you did connects to what they do. What did I do? Ethan asked. You showed them something they'd forgotten was possible, Victor said. Or maybe something they'd started to doubt was real. He looked at his hands. People get tired, even good people, even people who mean it. They get tired and they start to wonder if what they're doing makes a difference or if it just looks like it does. He looked at Ethan. And then a 19-year-old kid who didn't know anything about any of us jumped in front of a window because someone was in danger, and then kept choosing every single time the harder thing because it was right. He paused. That doesn't let people stay tired. Ethan looked at the floor. I want you to come to a chapter meeting, Victor said, not as a member, as someone I'm introducing, as someone this chapter has a connection to that I want made formal. He held Ethan's eyes. You saved my daughter's life. You helped break an operation that's been damaging people in this state for 3 years. You're building something in this workshop that's going to matter to people for a long time. He paused. That deserves to be known. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Lily said you don't do things for show, he said. Never. So this means something specific. It means, Victor said, that when people ask about this program and who runs it and where it came from, the answer includes who you are and what you did. It means this isn't informal. It means it's backed. A pause. And it means the people in my chapter, some of whom have been doing hard work in this community for decades without recognition, see that what they do creates the conditions for what you're doing. He looked at the workshop. It connects. Ethan stood with that. He thought about connection, about what it meant to be connected to something larger than yourself, not through obligation, not through debt, but through the genuine overlap of values, through doing the same work from different directions. Okay, he said. Saturday, Victor said, 8 o'clock. I'll be there. Victor stood up. He was about to leave, and then he stopped. Ethan? Sir, my daughter. Victor said it without preamble, without the particular weighted pause that fathers usually put before those words when they're aimed at a young man. He said it directly in the way he said everything. She's been through a significant thing. She's strong, she's always been strong, but strength and being okay are not always the same category. I know, Ethan said. She trusts you, Victor said, which is not a small statement from someone who has learned not to trust easily. He held Ethan's gaze. I'm not giving you a speech. I'm not drawing lines. You're not a man who needs to be told to be decent to the people who trust him. He paused. I'm just saying I see it, and I want you to know I see it. Ethan looked at him. She's important to me, he said, not because of anything that happened. She was already important before any of it. He met Victor's eyes. That's not going to change. Victor held his gaze for a moment. Then he nodded one clean final nod. He left the way he came, without announcement, taking the weight of his presence with him and leaving the workshop slightly quieter in its absence. Lily came to the workshop that evening. Not the next day, not the following week, that evening, 2 hours after her father left, as if there was a coordination Ethan wasn't entirely certain was accidental. She came with her sketchbook, which she brought most places now, and she came through the side door that she'd started using after the first time because the side door faced the parking lot and you could see both directions from it without it being obvious that you were looking. Some habits from 8 months of running were dissolving slowly. Some were staying. Ethan was finishing the inventory at a task that was more meditative than demanding the kind of work that kept the hands busy and let the mind move where it needed to. Lily sat on the workbench Victor had vacated 2 hours before and opened her sketchbook and began to draw. She didn't announce what she was drawing. She didn't need to. They had developed over the past weeks this particular way of being in the same space present, without demanding available, without requiring the kind of company that felt like the truest kind, because it didn't need performance to sustain it. After 20 minutes, she said, "My father talked to you." "Yes." "About the chapter meeting?" "Yes." She looked at the sketchbook. "He doesn't do that. Invite someone who's not a writer." "He said it wasn't membership." "It's not membership. It's something that doesn't have a name because he's never done it before." She paused. "He respects you." "I respect him." "I know." She looked up. "But I want you to understand what it means coming from him. He's spent 30 years building something he believes in. He's seen it misunderstood and misrepresented and judged by people who only know the surface of it. And the thing underneath, the loyalty, the real community, the people who show up when it matters, that's what he's been protecting." She held his eyes. "He's telling you that you're part of that thing underneath." Ethan set down the clipboard. He walked to where she was sitting, and he sat down beside her on the workbench, and she turned the sketchbook so he could see what she'd been drawing. It was the workshop, the workbench where Marcus had been, the engine, the tools hanging on the wall, and in the middle of it, not centered, not posed, just present in the natural position of someone in their own space of figure. Working, not heroic, not dramatic, just a person doing the thing they were there to do. "Is that me?" he said. "That's who you are here," she said, which is the same thing. He looked at the drawing, then he looked at her. "You're staying," and he said, "at Arizona State, in Phoenix." "I'm staying," she confirmed, "for the degree, for Carmen, who it turns out needs a friend more than she lets on, for the city." She paused. "For things that are here." "Things," he said. "One specific thing," she said, "but I'm not going to be dramatic about it. I wouldn't want you to be." She looked at him. "You know what I used to draw," she said, "in the months I was being moved around floor plans? Exit routes, the fastest way from any door to any street. I filled 3 sketchbooks with contingency plans." She looked at the current drawing. "I started this book the night you took me to your mother's house." She turned a few pages and showed him the early drawings the first week. Sandra's kitchen, the motel, Mara in the parking structure with the morning light coming through the concrete levels, Carmen eyes open looking up from the chair, Victor with his hands flat on the wall outside the workshop after the operation, head down, the posture of a man returning from somewhere far inside himself. And then later in the book, the workshop, the program participants, Marcus, Phil, the gradual accumulation of images that were not about escape or survival, about staying. "You stopped drawing exit routes," he said. "I stopped needing to." She closed the book. "That's the thing nobody tells you about fear. Not that it goes away, it doesn't entirely. But when you're somewhere you actually want to be, the fear doesn't have the same address. It doesn't live in the center anymore." She looked at him. "It moved to the edge, where it belongs." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "What's at the center?" he asked. She looked at him directly without the deflection or the careful indirection she'd used in the early days when directness had felt like exposure. "This," she said, "what we're building here. My father's world, which turns out to have more depth to it than I let myself see when I was busy being afraid of it. Carmen finding her footing. Mara figuring out what she's made of." She paused. "You." He looked at her. He didn't perform a response. He didn't find a line. He reached over and took her hand and she let him, and they sat in the workshop that smelled like engine grease and honest work, in the particular atmosphere of a place where broken things came to become something else. Outside, Phoenix was doing what Phoenix did in the early evening, running its ordinary life along its ordinary roads, thousands of people moving through thousands of ordinary moments, none of which would ever know what had happened in a diner on a rainy night, what had been set in motion by one person's choice to move before the calculation finished. None of which needed to know. The thing had happened. The thing was real. And the consequences of it, the people, save who might not have been the program running that hadn't run before the chapter connections made the cases built, the young woman drawing things worth drawing instead of ways out. All of that was living and ongoing and permanently woven into the fabric of the world, unreachable by any revision. The chapter meeting happened on Saturday at 8 o'clock. Ethan came. Victor introduced him. Not with a speech, not with the performance of acknowledgement that could have been made from an event this significant. He said Ethan's name, and he said what Ethan had done, and he said what Ethan was doing now. And the 43 people in that room, people who had seen difficult things and done hard things and built something real over decades, listened with a particular quality of attention that is only available to people who have the experience to recognize what they're being told. When Victor finished, there was a moment of quiet. Then Dutch, who expressed appreciation, the way the desert expressed humidity, which was almost never stood up and put his hands together once. And then everyone in the room did the same. Not noise, not theater. The specific weighted acknowledgement of people who did not do things for show, recognizing something they decided was worth recognizing. Ethan stood at the front of the room and felt for the first time in his life the thing he had never known to want. Not fame, not money, not the particular need to be seen that usually drove people toward visible things. Just this, just the knowledge that what you'd done had mattered to people who understood what it cost. Just belonging to something larger than yourself that was worth belonging to. Victor looked at him from across the room. Ethan looked back. And in that look without words was everything that didn't need to be said. The diner, the window, the glass on the floor, the phone call. At 2 a.m, the medical bills and the compound and the kitchen and the parking structure and the warehouse and the 43 people in the room who were here because someone once taught them that loyalty was built on the willingness to choose someone else's safety over your own comfort. And a boy who had learned it not from anyone teaching him, but from the simple, undefeatable fact of who he already was. Some people hear a danger and they calculate. Some people hear a danger and they run. And some people, the rare ones, the ones who remake the world around them without meaning to hear a danger, and they move without thinking, without weighing, without needing to know what it will out before they decide it's worth it. Ethan Walker had moved, and everything that followed, every life changed, every person freed, every broken thing repaired, had followed from that single, unrepeatable, absolute moment when a 19-year-old boy in a diner chose someone else's life over his own fear. That choice could not be unmade. That choice was already permanent, and that precisely that was more than enough.